so nice to see every one of you. Very nice that you all made it, and I think we might see a few more people coming in. So, very nice. And as for those who don't know, this is the second evening. So yesterday we did an evening discussion about future cities, more like the tangible part of the cities, about vertical farming, about sustainable homes. And tonight we're going to discuss around blockchain and governance, and maybe we'll touch a little bit of artificial intelligence. So it's going to be a really exciting discussion. And to give you a little bit of the history of what happened and why we do this. Joe McKinney is a very good friend of mine, and he's with running the Star Societies Foundation and a few other projects. And we were talking about future cities and future societies. So I'm developing Voltaire World. You might see one of the logos there on the not the front row, unfortunately. it's that banner there. So I'm developing a concept around sustainable homes and vertical farming to improve the spaces that we live in, to feel better in the place that we live and live more sustainably, so not to waste food, to reduce the CO2 emissions for food delivery, and to have healthier food in the place that we live. So that's the concept of community housing that I'm developing, and I was talking with Joe about how can we make this into something that we grow into future cities, and how do we make this concept larger. So we had a really nice discussion, and we said, like, okay, let's do something about it. And our result is this event. So we really wanted to cover everything about the future cities and societies. So we covered some aspects about vertical farming, about sustainable homes. And today the goal is to first to talk about how the societies are going to work. Are we going to have the same type of countries? Where are we going to live? There's a lot of interest in seasteading, so I think we're definitely going to touch a few aspects around seasteading and new societies, new cities, and governance, which is so important into setting up new structures and societies. So I'm very excited about the event, and I hope that you share the passion, and whenever you have questions or you think there is something that was not mentioned in the discussion, ask questions. Unless one of the speakers says not to ask questions, I don't think anyone has that habit. So definitely be curious, and I hope that you learn something new or get more support on your ideas, or at least find people who really like what you're doing, or you like someone else's ideas. So definitely facilitate the conversations and get new ideas and be inspired. So welcome everyone again, and I'll pass the floor now to our guest, Tony Lane. She's right here. Perfect. So Tony is a magical human. She's going to tell you about culture and a few other things that she's doing.
Woo! All of us together for bringing all of you guys here. Some of you might have seen me working the bar. I like to work the bar. I also like living in a Burning Man epic of society, that our world should be participatory and inclusive. And if you have the opportunity to get engaged, why not do it? So, how many libertarians do I have in the room tonight? Okay, cool. Yeah, anarchist, crypto-anarchist, that also applies. So, how many of you, what words come to mind if I say describe the or a nation state? Do you guys want to throw some out?
Antiquated.
Antiquated? Violent. Oppressive.
Extortive.
Bandits. What? Bandits. Bandits?
Bandits!
Yeah, bandits.
Easily bribed.
Easily bribed. Bandits, easily bribed. Unavoidable.
That's giving up right there.
So here, I totally agree. Is that giving up? So here's my question. Why in this room of people who all believe that a nation is a violent, forceful, and coercive entity, why have so many people thought about using blockchain technology to redefine governance by building virtual nations? It's something that actually confuses and confounds me, so much so that I spent 5 years of my life working on using blockchain technology to do just that, to build virtual nation states using blockchain technology. And you know what I realized? I was playing in the same system that I was trying to avoid, and that it was unavoidable. In calling something that you are creating in a new paradigm, calling a new paradigm by an old world word is to mistake the change for the problem. And so I took a step back from my life after investing 5 years in constructing virtual nations to say, what is really the emergent shift? And I started looking at things like First Nations. My adopted family is Indigenous. And Indigenous nations do not look at themselves as nation states. They do not look at themselves as entities. They look at themselves as one with each other and with the earth around them that they steward. They look at themselves as a community, where every member of that community is responsible for the well-being of their sovereign individuality and responsible for the collective stewardship of their local community. That looked like a better model to me than having every investor that I talked to ask me when I was going to have an army or what I would do about the pirates. Those were real questions. I had an answer for them, by the way. So what I'm working on right now is a company called Culture, and it is basically the idea that the future of government is not a nation. The future of government is a community, and in building a community, you can own your sovereignty. But it's not necessarily saying we're sovereign as a violent nation. It's that we are a nation of sovereign individuals bound together by a system of our values, our ethics, and our moral codes that allow us to align with what we believe to be just in the world and to bring that vision to fruition as a collective. So our Telegram group is t.me/culture-is-the-future, and we build protocol infrastructure for collective stewardship of sovereign identity, along with a reputation protocol that is not based on reputation. It's based on something more important, which is restoration. Because if you expect to have governance without empathy, you will inevitably create violence. Before we have governance, we need to understand each other. And so reputation through restoration to inspire new systems of governance through self-organizing and emergent community. Like I said, our Telegram group is t.me/culture-is-future, and my name is Tony Lane Casserly. You can find me on Telegram and on Twitter at TonyLaneC, and the future of government is community. So would love to have you all as a part of our work, and thank you so much for your time today.
Woo!
Thank you so much, Tony. And now I'd like to give the stage to our wonderful sponsor, CityChain, who are running really a new idea to create governance structures. And Laurel is going to give the introduction and tell about it more. So, floor is yours.
Woo!
Woo!
It's a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. My name is Laurel Tincher. I know some of you from my work with Blue Frontiers and Seasteading, and I've just recently joined the CityChain team, so I'm excited to now be working on both of those projects, and happy to answer any seasteading questions aside as well. So the founders of CityChain are John and Sandra. The founders of CityChain are John and Sandra, and they are based in Norway, so they couldn't be here with us tonight, but we're all really happy to be involved. And so, I'm sure you've all had the experience of standing in line at the DMV for hours, going through a lengthy permitting process, even having your identity stolen or your financial information leaked. The experience of being a citizen today is inefficient, it's confusing, it's scattered, and it lacks security and transparency. With Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and the blockchain, we can now store and transfer information and assets securely between any two people with an immutable ledger. But the next step is to actually expand the use and accessibility of these technologies by providing people with services and platforms that they can use on a day-to-day basis. So CityChain's goal is to modernize the experience of being a citizen. And we've done this by launching the CityChain and the Smart City platform, which launched just in October. So imagine having this one platform where all of your citizenry information is easily accessible to you. Everything from your insurance to your identity, vehicle registration, and even voting. So CityChain is a proof-of-stake blockchain. It's built on the Stratus platform, and it was made initially to support the establishment of.
It's not twisted. I think it's more angled so that the top of the mic like that.
It's better.
Complete.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a quiet voice there. So initially, CityChain was made to support the development of private cities, alternative communities, and other types of new developments. But it can be used for any existing city or government as well. So the Smart City platform is built on the CityChain, and it's a conglomeration of existing blockchain services as well as new ones that we will build. We know that there are already many blockchain companies working on services such as Propi's working on property transaction, DIF is the Decentralized Identity Foundation, they're working on decentralized identities. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel with all of these companies, we just want to make them all in one place. So some of these include, as I mentioned, property registry, voting, vehicle registry, insurance, communities around a certain topic or idea, merchant frameworks for local businesses, your identity information, contracts, and secure messaging. So this might all sound great in theory, but we really want CityChain to be used in reality. The founders of CityChain actually came up with the idea because they are working on establishing Norway's first private city called Liberstad. So you can see on the map here where Liberstad is. Oslo is there on the right, and Liberstad is in southern Norway. It's about a 45-minute drive from the coast. It's about 1,100 acres right now. They're actually working on adding more land to it, and it includes several large lakes and agricultural buildings that were there before. It's currently zoned for cabin vacation use, which means that foreigners can buy land there and have what they call a vacation home. Otherwise, you might not necessarily be able to buy land in Norway. So last year, they sold the first number of plots. They sold 200,000 square meters to 123 people from 33 different countries. So it's a really exciting international group of people. It's based on voluntarism principles, so as she just mentioned, we like that. We're building community, and whatever you want to bring there, you can bring it. It is a private city, so Liberstad as a company will be providing your basic city services such as road maintenance, the sale of plots, maintenance of common areas and parks, and your security and safety and other basic city services. And because it is a company, and if you agree to live there, you're basically signing a contract with them. It's, rather than right now where you're just born into a government and you're stuck with whatever they give you, you can actually change the contract at any time. You can leave, you can hire a new company to come in and take over. So City Hub is the actual portal into CityChain. It's live now, you can download it on your laptop, and we're working on the mobile app. So right now it has a cryptocurrency wallet. It also has this map here where you can see all of the existing businesses around the world that already accept cryptocurrencies. And we're adding new functionality every day. CityCoin is the currency used on CityChain. We will also be supporting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but CityCoin is the basis we're using. The stake reward, so as I mentioned, it's a proof of stake, not a proof of work, so Bitcoin is a proof of work blockchain. So with staking, you can stake your city coins, and that helps keep the blockchain running, and as a reward for that, you receive more city coins. So CityCoin was pre-mined, and those coins were donated to 3 different foundations just to get the ball rolling. Those were the CityChain Foundation, the Private City Fund, and an incubator program. So the CityChain Foundation is a nonprofit that is set up just to keep CityChain itself running and the Smart City platform. The Private City Fund is another nonprofit that will provide grants and fundings to new smart cities and new communities. So they will provide research and investment and advisement to anybody that wants to start their own community. And then the incubator program finally is a fund that will help support projects related to this space. So blockchain governance projects, city service projects. So CityChain, they started developing it about a year ago, and as I mentioned, it just launched in October. And Lieberstadt is also in development. I visited there in June, and they were working on building the roads and renovating the buildings there. So we're very excited. Thank you. That's our information. You can find us online. Any questions?
So I noticed that, Tony's opening was a little bit, radical, and you've come in and you're working within the infrastructure of existing nation states. How radical and or malleable is your team to, new models of living that might challenge the existing nation state monopoly?
So the CityChain team is actually very radical. They're extremely, they're Norwegians, so they kind of grew up with that mindset, but they are very much voluntarists and more on the anarchist side. So that's really the foundations of this project, but they do recognize that they own this land within Norway. They can't just do whatever they want. So, and we also want to make something that can be used by people everywhere, because this is a platform that we can use it here and we really need it. So it's made to be flexible, but it has certain principles behind why it's being built.
I know that. So if I were to occupy Richardson Bay with a bunch of homeless people from San Francisco, would CityChain be down to playing that game?
Which game?
Never mind. I'm sorry.
Okay.
How do things like visas work? If I want to go live forever in Utah, do I have to get a Norwegian visa? If I'm from, Pakistan, I might not be able to do that.
Yeah. So currently, you can go to Norway for 3 months at a time. If you're European, I think you can go for longer. It's easier. But Lieberstadt is working on an agreement where anybody that owns land within Lieberstadt would be able to stay longer. So they don't have to finalize, but that would be the goal.
So you guys said your proof of stake and willing to master or some area?
It's on the Stratus platform. It's a proof of stake. I don't know.
I was just curious about how much autonomy Lieberstadt has, and is it basically just what any locality would have, or do they have general civil autonomy bound by Norwegian criminal law?
Yeah, so it is still bound by Norwegian law, but basically because a company owns the land, they are kind of allowed to do what they want with
zoning.
Yes, I believe so. So the land is agricultural for them, but they've actually zoned the residential area as cabin town, which is what I mentioned before. Norway has a law where if it's a cabin or a second home, foreigners can own land there. So they've zoned it that way, at least for now, until they have the visas with that.
Why? Oh, sorry.
Recent laws that say the hardest to change, so how are you doing? What's the status of changing the migration law or resident?
Like the visas or migration law? I don't know the answer to that. I know that they're working on, like I said, people who own land there being able to live there full time, but I don't know what the process is.
How was Norway selected? Is there like a specific reason?
John and Sandra are Norwegian, so that's why.
Okay.
Bert Ola, Istvan, he's from Sweden, and most likely he's involved in this community
interesting because there is a lot of free space and low population, and because the government is pretty well functioning as it is, they are actually more open to people going out in the middle of nowhere and trying something new. So it's surprising.
Do you think the fact that no is not part of the EU is relevant to that, or not so much?
I don't think so.
All right.
Thank you.
And now we're gonna start the keynote part. So the first person to take the stage will be Peterson, and then we're gonna have people coming in just according to the program. So Christine, ready?
Yeah. We'll wait for the slides. Here we go. Okay. So, how's it sounding? Sounding okay?
Yes.
All right. So, what's the topic today? Future cities and the software to run them, law, cyberspace, and new concepts of governance. We wanted to get every possible buzzword in there for you. So I'm going to do a super high level overview, and don't worry, we've got domain experts coming up, including 2 law professors and an expert on cryptocurrency and sea studying. We've got everything you could want. Okay, so what's the dream? What's the goal? We want a world maximizing all possible good interactions and minimizing possible bad interactions. So how do you summarize that? We want cooperation without vulnerability. That term comes from Mark Miller in a wonderful talk he gave called Computer Security as the Future of Law, which is on YouTube. He gave this 20 years ago. It's still a classic, highly recommended. So cooperation without vulnerability. We want cooperation. We want lots and lots of voluntary interactions, as many as possible, without vulnerability, with minimizing involuntary interactions. That's it. That's the whole deal. So human laws have been trying to do this for millennia with mixed success. I mean, we've had some success. We're doing much better than in the old days in some parts of the world. But we want to do much better. So the goal is to do even better online and also in some new physical communities we want to build, including charter cities, whether these are on the sea or eventually in space, conceivably. So let's contrast the online and the physical world. What's the main thing about the physical world? Well, it's meat space, right? We're made of meat. You've probably heard this. It's a classic on the internet. We're stuck in meat space. No matter how much, we're in Silicon Valley, we love cyberspace. No matter how much you want to upload and be online, you can't do it. And you're not going to do it anytime soon. We're stuck here, okay? So somehow we've got to make all this stuff work in meat space. We are meat entities currently. Okay, so what's the difference between meat space and cyberspace? Well, meat space, or sometimes we call it dirt space. Why do we call it that? Well, all the laws have to do with the dirt. Where is the dirt, right? You go outside, you touch the dirt. The dirt is in San Francisco. It's a city, it's in a county, it's in a state, it's in a country. That dirt determines all the rules you have to live under. It's a dirt, we live in 3D dirt space. We are meat space entities in a dirt space world. That's where we live. Our laws are on paper. That's how we got our laws, they're on paper. We have human courts where meat space entities slap their meat at each other. Right? That's how we resolve our disputes, with flapping our meat. Hey, we laugh, but that's really right. That's how it is. We have fiat currencies where the dirt space jurisdictions tell us this piece of paper is worth a certain amount of money, and you have to believe it. You don't argue about it. That's how it is. There are physical commodities and physical war. That's one of the big problems with dirt space and meat space. It's a bloody place. There's physical violence. And that's how we got all of this, right? That's how we got all these rules. We're trying to minimize these negative interactions that are naturally inherent in meat space. And the jurisdictions are, as I said, they're dirt-based. So jurisdiction means who gets to tell you what the rules are. So they're dirt-based rules. Compare that to the beauty and cleanliness of cyberspace, right? Our dream.
Oh, great narrative.
Our dream, right? This is. We're getting to the joke part. Our dream dream. You can tell there's some people who know about cyberspace and others who still have a dream. So what's the dream? The dream is our communications are encrypted so that only the people who are supposed to read them read them. Our contracts are smart so that things happen the way they say and it works. Our cryptocurrencies are in some way relatively stable. I would
agree.
That's the dream, right? Cyber war. That's the nightmare part of the dream. Okay? That's the dream would be, is there a way to get away from cyber war? And the jurisdiction, I'm not even sure the term jurisdiction really applies, because who do you turn to enforce things? It's not particularly clear. And certainly going to the dirt-based jurisdictions is not going to work very well, right? Because they just don't understand this world at all. Okay, what is our reality? Well, you can't go live in cyberspace, but increasingly you can't live 100% in dirt space either. It's getting harder and harder to do everything in the physical world and not ever go online. It's getting harder. In fact, I'm not even sure if there are many things you can't do anymore in the physical world. You have to do them online. So we have our Internet of Things, where physical objects run over the internet. We have smart property, a concept from Nick Szabo, where products incorporate software which enforces contract terms. We already see this now. He envisioned it in terms of cars, that if you don't pay your car loan, they stop working. We may already have that, and those OnStar cars probably, I would be surprised if they keep working if you stop paying on those. We have hybrid contracts, or split contracts, as Mark Miller calls them, where you've got a smart contract component, but then when that thing maxes out and you need human intervention, that it is booted out for exception handling by a human being. In China, I've heard now that it's getting harder and harder to pay for anything with cash. You sort of have to use your smartphone. Now, I'm not sure to what extent that was driven by government. It seems to be driven more by private entities, but the connection between private entities and government in China is often very close. In fact, just by the way, maybe I won't say this in the microphone, have any of you been wondering why it's called the Chinese Communist Party?
It seems a little bit of war is peace.
It's historical. It's a historical accident, but that is not a communist country, for sure, right? Okay, so what's happening now? We're seeing the revolt of meat space, right? Meat space folks, and I do not mean to demean these folks. We have some very responsible folks in the world. They are in a position where they've been tasked to keep us safe, to enforce the law, to try to make sure that bad things don't happen to us, and they take that very seriously. They don't necessarily see privacy issues the way we do. They have been tasked with this job. They take it very seriously, and they don't necessarily see the roadblocks that we might immediately say, but what about this? They don't even see those, right? They want to do their job. They want to keep us safe. They aren't necessarily bad people. They have very different perspectives from us. So they try to regulate or outlaw encryption. They want to tax cryptocurrencies. They put backdoors into the hardware, the firmware, the software. But the most distressing thing to me recently, I don't know how many of you have read about this new Australian law, one that just passed. Not many of you have seen this. You gotta look this way. I've seen Fred Moulton's, yes, you've seen it. Okay, go online and look about new Australian encryption law just passed.
What's legal, what the NSA is already doing.
On December 6th, basically, what they're, yes, I think that's what so they understand you're not supposed to break encryption. So they say, okay, we're not going to break encryption. We're just going to go around encryption. So we're going to do things, we're going to require the companies, private companies, to cooperate with us to install, like send out a false software update that's only for you, right? So that it looks like a regular update that everybody's getting, but yours is different, right? And instead, it does things like it puts in a keylogger or screen capture. So technically, no, they're not breaking encryption. They're just, we all understand, right? In order for a human being to read the data, it's got to be unencrypted. So when you get it, it's unencrypted and it can be intercepted at that point. So they're not breaking that rule at all. They're just going around it. It's an extremely broad law. It was passed very quickly, and I'm not going to read all this to you, but it's actually very disturbing. And if this model spreads, I think we have a real problem. I'm concerned about Australia. Any of you who have Australian programmers, or if you've got Australian IT investments or Australian offices, anybody with software in Australia, you have a problem. You already know about it. You almost certainly already know about it. But I would, it's not a time to start a software company in Australia, for sure. And you do not want to send out your software updates from Australia now, because people are going to be nervous about it. Okay. So this is the revolt of MeatSpace. This is just going to keep going on. The folks in MeatSpace, as I said, they're very serious. They're used to running the show, and they're not giving up what they regard as their legitimate ability to make things happen in our world. Okay. So what's going on in cyberspace? Well, we have chronically, notoriously insecure software. You've heard the phrase move fast and break things. Yeah, they're broken all the time, right? And back when it was not about money and physical security, it really didn't matter. You know, if it was just about whether I can get on Facebook or not, who cares? I really, you know, I might be better off, actually, if I couldn't. You've all seen me on Facebook, by the way. I spend way too much time there. So,
that is total value add.
It's I totally.
And all of you are welcome to friend me on Facebook, but if you do, send me a message too, because otherwise I'll ignore that. So, okay. So they're running on chronically, notoriously insecure operating systems. You know, these this is Silicon Valley, probably everybody knows this, but all these software updates, when they say a security update, they mean we found another hole. And they do this, like, it seems like every day, right? And it never ends. It never ends. So basically, it's just completely insecure. The security paradigm that we're using for our operating systems is still this access control lists, which is an old model. And it's like building your buildings with insufficient locks on the doors on sand, right? So you can patch and patch and patch, and you can try to fill in under the building with more sand. It's never going to be secure. We do know how to do this better, but it's more expensive, right? So it's just, there's been no financial reason, no security reason to switch over to a more secure way to do this. It's like we're frogs in the hot water. It's getting hotter and hotter, but it's still okay. We can live with it. We don't want to pay these high costs. We're just going to tough it out. Eventually, we're going to have to bite the bullet and say, you know, we actually do need secure software, and we're actually going to have to pay the higher costs to have secure software. It's going to happen. It's going to take a lot of pain to get us there, I think, and it's getting more and more painful. Those of you who want to read about how to do it, you can go to agoric.com, which talks about object capabilities and how to do this. It's not my field, but you'll enjoy that. Okay. So what are these negative meat cyber interactions that we're already seeing and that are just going to keep ramping up? So you've heard of safety first. Well, we live in a security last world, right? Software gets coded, does it work, and then they go, yeah, let's put some security on, like frosting on a cake. That's not how you do it. It's never going to work that way, right? So the downside is the most automated societies are also the least secure to cyber attack. The more software you use in your society, the more vulnerable you are. This is kind of counterintuitive. You'd think high tech would be less vulnerable. No, it's actually the opposite, which means, unfortunately, this even applies to things like electricity, which is a life or death matter, okay? It's not like, is Facebook up? It's like, is the power on, or are we going to have to evacuate the western seaboard because there's no power, and there isn't going to be power for months, right? That can happen. It actually can happen. So the US is a great example. We're relatively highly automated. We have lousy computer security. That makes us extremely vulnerable. It's you know, we went from, not that long ago, we felt like a very secure place to live, to now I feel like this is a very insecure place to live, strictly for this software reason. What's the worst case? Well, if you have a country like the US that traditionally felt secure, suddenly now figures out, and you guys are some of the first ones to figure it out, some of you knew before I did, that, oh no, it's the exact opposite. We're highly insecure. What are we going to do? Well, we still have physical power, right? We still have military power. We still have nuclear weapons. And that's the kind of thing that politicians fall back on if suddenly they feel threatened. We're not there yet. Right now, we're just in a trade dispute with China, right? It's just a trade dispute. Do these things ever escalate? I think they should escalate. So that's something to watch. I'm not sure what to do about it, actually. I think the main thing to do about it would be we're going to have to bite the bullet and get more secure, especially on the utilities, because that's the one where I think we're the most vulnerable. Okay. So, last slide. There's an opportunity here, and we're going to hear about it from our other speakers, which is, I've been talking about all these problems. Well, but this is a great opportunity to say, all right, we can do better. We can do much better in our startup cities. We can do much better in our seasteads. In particular, at least some of our speakers that are coming up here are, I would say, they're cyber experts. They certainly all have access to cyber experts. Even I have experts, world-class people I can call on if I actually, had the funds to do something. So, so we can do this. We know how to do this better. It's going to take a lot of work, but the payoffs are huge because as time goes by, whether it's 10 years or 20 years from now, people are going to be saying, where can I put my assets? Where can I put my IP? Where can I go physically that has some cybersecurity? Where can I be safe? Where can my family be safe? Where can my assets be safe? Well, our next speakers are going to look at that question. So, and the goal, by the way, I'm not advocating here we create a parallel world apart from meat space. I don't think that's the way it's going to play out. I don't think that's even worthwhile. We've seen what happens if you do that. You get cut off from the global banking system, which is like a non-starter, right? You do not want to get cut off from the global banking system. So we want to create a world that's as free as possible, which can still connect up to the global banking system. So that's it from me, and I don't know if we have questions, but thank you for your attention.
Specifically, your last assertion was the most intriguing, especially being in a blockchain, like space. I believe that we, as a collective, I don't know about everyone in particular, are trying to create the solution to if you are cut off from the global banking system, ain't no worries. So, you know what I mean? Like, is it really that big a deal 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now to be cut off from the banking system? Whereas today it might be a big deal?
I don't know. I want to be able to travel. I think it's fine with me if you can do it, go for it. I'm going to, because I'm kind of a conventional person, I'm probably going to live in a conventional place. But if you guys can create something that's actually disconnected, go for it. I think I'd be happy if we can just maximize freedom within the physical, within the constraints of the meat space. I'm okay. You don't want to be a robot. I don't want to be. No, I don't want to be I'm happy being a human being. I'm fine. I don't need to be an upload. I enjoy a robot body. Does the robot body get all the feelings?
You need to be.
These are great feelings. I really enjoyed this body.
Is this
awesome body? Okay.
Is this assertion that you need to be a robot in order to conquer meat space law that's antiquated? Because
Okay, we're going to have lots of time for questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to Louis, and let's get some more speakers up here. Thank you very much.
Great. I love these questions. Keep them for the Q&A session. It's going to be amazing. So now I'm going to open the floor for Zoltan, and he's going to talk about a little bit about transhumanism and a little bit about societies. So welcome.
Thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm a teeny bit sick, so hopefully I won't go through a coughing spree, but let's get started and see how we can do. My talk's a little bit different, I think, than a lot of other people's because I'm going to focus on this subject that I really, I guess, am known for, which is transhumanism. And so for you who don't know, transhumanism has become this social movement, kind of born out of Silicon Valley, that now tens of millions of people around the world want to use. And it's a science and technology essentially applied to the human being to evolve it, to make it something much more radical, brain implants, exoskeleton suits, even things like driverless cars. But it's a phenomenon that's been catching on very quickly in San Francisco and all around the world to, I guess, startups and things like that, that not only from a capitalistic perspective want to make a lot more money, but also that want to really make it so that essentially we would maybe one day merge with machines, or at least have enough synthetic biology so our worlds are a lot better. But one of the main goals of transhumanism is to eliminate suffering. And you know, there are now robotic arms, we have exoskeleton suits. I think everybody in this room is quite familiar with a lot of the radical technologies that are out there. If you're in a wheelchair, there's a good chance you won't be in a wheelchair more than 2 or 3 more years if you have the technology, because we have that kind of stuff either through stem cells or exoskeleton suits or whatever coming through the pipeline. So the age of disability is actually literally ending thanks to a lot of the transhumanist researchers and people just using radical science and technology. I'm going to get into it in a little bit, in a way, how this can actually act in a very beneficial way to governing and new cities and things like that. But bear with me first to the technology, because it's really important to understand the landscape. Because when you're talking about government services, when you're talking about currencies, cryptocurrencies, you're talking about all these other things, you're also talking about essentially a new human being. A human being that is something that's quite different than what we've been used to, something that might be more than just meat space and things like that. I have a chip implant in my hand. I can open my front door and start cars. It's a tiny thing the size of a grain of rice. I think there's about 40 or 50,000 people worldwide that now have implants. And some of the new implants allow you to pay and do different things like that. But there are all sorts of different mechanisms coming onto the market right now that allow you to do different things in the same way that we've always been doing. And for libertarians in this room, and those of you who don't know, I was actually the endorsed candidate in California running for libertarian governor in 2018. That's a very controversial thing to have implants. Not only implants in your hand, but of course brain implants. We have 2 of the largest companies that specialize in brain implants in California, Elon Musk and Brian Johnson, who has the company Kernel. And there is a very good chance in 10 years that we will come to a point when we will be able to upload information into our brains, and we will then be able to transfer that or say that to somebody else's brain directly without the internet, just through our brains, mind to mind. And of course, we might all be able to connect, even in this one single room, where you don't have to go to an event like this. You can imagine it, or you can at least have it distributed through your neurons, and so you would experience it directly. There are numerous researchers, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into this specific industry right now here in San Francisco. And beyond Google and Apple and all the others who are also working on it. So there's a whole bunch of people that are very interested in these new types of realities and new types of technologies that are going to take us to the next level of what could be called transhumanity. Even some of the things like 3D projected imageries. Now, one of the things about this talk that I want to tell you is I just gave this talk in Dubai under invite of the Prime Minister's office. I was on a month-long speaking tour going around mostly Europe, but met a couple of heads of state, President of Armenia, and some of these other people. And there's a huge amount of interest from governments and presidents and prime ministers and even rulers of countries that are wanting to understand how transhumanism can apply to their governments and how they can take the next leap ahead, especially a place like Dubai, which is always trying to lead on the forefront. Dubai is spending millions of dollars on blockchain technology to try to make it work in a government services perspective. And so, there's a lot of other different types of technology, of course, out there like that. And one of the things we've talked about is even virtual reality. I was the nominee in 2016 for the Transhumanist Party as the US presidential candidate, and I campaigned in Second Life. Even though you have to get outside of Second Life to vote, there are still people campaigning in it. Bernie Sanders and other people are campaigning in these different kinds of venues in virtual reality and stuff like that. So we're coming to an era when a lot of different types of ideas are quite different. There's a very good chance by 2020, when the elections come around, you're going to see a lot more holographic images of people that are doing things, campaigning, even giving talks, maybe trying to sell you something, maybe even just startups, CEOs that are trying to pitch you something, where you do it in a holographic reality. And we're going to come to a point in probably 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, depending on how fast the technology grows, where the holographic images of you, because they're AI-based, can start interacting back with you. And of course, for people that have lost loved ones and stuff like that, can you imagine having a lost loved one walking down the halls and talking back to you? These things are happening. People have companies like this, and people are working on these kinds of things to try to bring these these technologies to life. And of course, there's predictive apps and everything else that are coming out in the market right now. And one of my friends has this company, Brilliant, Imai, And this is the new you basically take this out, you put it in an outlet, any outlet in the room, and it's basically like your smartphone plugged in every single room. Now, for libertarians, that might be scary because you're always being watched, of course. Yeah. But for the ones that are looking to be more practical, more efficient, who want to watch their children, what they're doing, or want to even read books to their children from another room, you can do it all this kind of technology. And of course, one of the robots here in the bottom is in San Francisco already, and we're finding, I know a lot of libertarians find this stuff tough, but the reality is, tough or not, it's there are people investing tens of millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's probably all going to become a reality. The Dubai government, I got to be honest, was very interested in that, the fact that every single outlet could be replaced, and then we would have eyes on everyone. Of course the government is interested in that, they want to watch you, but maybe that's not what we want, but it's something for us to consider, and it's for us to consider the technology that's coming out. I'm going quickly through a lot of the different kinds of technologies that are out there, just so you understand the governing landscape that's going to be here in about 5 or 10 years. Of course, drones will be everywhere. They're going to start carrying campaign posters and delivering pizzas and whatnot. And eventually, even this technology has been a little slow to develop, I'm sad to say, but eventually a lot of the things that we may buy could be printed out in 3D printers. And finally, of course, the big, I guess, 800-pound gorilla in the room is artificial intelligence. How far will that go? Will that determine how we drive and all these other things? And the answer is almost certainly yes. But we're coming to a very critical age where when we talk about governance, when we talk about policies, when we talk about the different kinds of rights that are out there, they're going to be changing because we have so much new technology that's built into the system. And one of the things I've been doing over the last 5 years is campaigning to get our United States government to consider the ramifications. If you remember the debates between Trump and Hillary, you don't remember anything about science, you don't remember anything about technology because they don't talk about those things. They talk about taxes and everything else that's kind of commonplace. But what is changing our world more than anything else right now? And that's science and technology. I mean, we have things like genetic editing, designer babies. Just 2 weeks ago, somebody in China manipulated the genome on twin girls. We are starting to restructure what the human being means. This requires new ideas on policy and new ideas on tackling some of these issues. And frankly, our politicians aren't up to it at all. So one of my goals as running for these public positions, knowing that I'm probably not going to win because I'm not in that position yet to be well known enough, is to just enter into the kind of lexicon a lot of these new ideas so that people start understanding when you talk about transhumanism, when you talk about the future, we need to consider new ways of governance, new ways of policies based on a lot of these different types of technologies that are coming out. It's so funny, Trump talks so much about immigration being the big problem, the big issue as to build a wall. The reality is that jobs have been lost to automation. And there's no other, other place really to point. That's where jobs are going, and by the time 2020 rolls around, that's even more so where jobs are going to be going. These are very serious issues. Everybody in this room will be affected. Everybody in this room may have, at some point, have their job, their career, even if you spent 20 years on it, sacrificed because a machine or a robot can do something better. And the same thing with designer babies, the idea that we can create higher IQ. I do some consulting with the US military, and I've warned them that the Chinese are literally trying to augment and improve intelligence of their next generation of children. Can you imagine if the entire generation of Chinese babies has a higher IQ than us by, let's say, 20 points on average? I mean, maybe, who knows, that's already true. What if it's 20 or 30 or 40 points? The point, though, is America doesn't want to go down that path because we're very conservative and our government is a little bit sketched out. And of course, the very first thing we heard about CRISPR, we put a moratorium on it and all these other things. Well, whether that's right or wrong is not for me necessarily to decide, but one thing's for sure, if China is moving forward, we have a national security issue on our hands because an entire generation of Chinese babies could be born smarter than our next generation. And that will create something that will be, that's not going to probably look pretty here in 20 or 30 years. So the other big, I guess, elephant in the room is that, one of my biggest passions is trying to conquer aging, is trying to stave off biological death, is to try to essentially say we can stop aging through either genetics or bionic organs or some of these other things. And so some of you who follow my work, that's been one of the main focuses that I've really worked on. But a lot of this technology is starting to come to pass now. We now have a couple different things that hopefully will get FDA approval here in the next few years. There are a number of companies dealing with bionic organs. Most people die from organ failure. So we're coming to an age when there's a good chance within 25 years you could live 20 or 30% longer through radical technology, and maybe 50 years you won't even have to face death. And then we can even reverse aging at some of these points. Maybe some of this is skeptical at this point. Maybe some of this is unproven science. But there are now literally billions of dollars. I mean, Google has one of the largest life extension companies in the world, I think now with a $3 billion funding. If we all live to 150, how can the government afford to pay Social Security, pay all these different things out there? We're entering a kind of shift in our idea of what it means to govern, because human beings are not human beings anymore. They're not necessarily going to be terminal. They're not necessarily going to be flesh. They're not necessarily going to be, ideas that can, I suppose, as they are now, working in a capitalistic environment. Capitalism may not survive in 20 years if robots become that efficient and can replace many of our jobs. So these all bring up really, radical issues. But the thing I want to leave you with tonight before I end is that transhumanism is this field that's going to be affecting the way we govern nations. And with that in mind, you have to keep an open mind to different types of policies that can come out and actually lead us down that path. It's not just about cryptocurrencies or blockchains or different ways of being efficient. It's about understanding that the human being in itself is going to dramatically change. The human being in itself is going to become almost a completely brand new entity, and that brand new entity might require new laws. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's very, very interesting discourse about CRISPR babies. And one thing is, it's really fascinates me because, like, when CRISPR was discovered, there were a few articles going around saying that yeah, the Chinese are designing babies, and no one was really paying attention to that. And then, like, this autumn, fall, that was like all over media, and now actually I read that Harvard is doing investigations into designing babies too. So it's very very interesting how media portrays that. But anyway, so now I know that there has been some marketing going around that this event is where you get to meet two Friedmans in one room. So this is, for those who came for that, you're really lucky, because now I'm going to introduce Patri Friedman, and yeah, the floor is yours. Tell us everything that you're excited about.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Patri Friedman. I started at the CityChain Institute in Ephemeral. I've been kind of interested in this idea of how we can create more autonomy and fragment sovereignty for almost 20 years now. I'm honored to be here with my wife Britt and my dad David, and to see so many of my friends here. I'm gonna try to do kind of two Hegelian dialectics in 15 minutes. Kind of one bigger one and one smaller one. I want to talk about, as Christine did, about cyberspace and meat space and how each of them is important in their own way, and kind of explore the pure cyberspace paradigm, the pure meat space paradigm, and then the mixed paradigm of how they kind of realistically interact. And then kind of very briefly in that same model, talk about the charter citizens he said they're totally impossible model, the charter citizens he said they're completely inevitable and almost here model, and then the more realistic, like they maybe are here if we work on them in the right way. So hopefully that all makes sense. So cyberspace, meat space, and the intersection. So we can talk about the kind of the pure cyberspace model, the crypto anarchy idea that okay, so in the physical world, things are really tough. We've got like all these bandits, and they're like taking our money, they're taking our stuff, they're threatening us. Like things are really hard. You can't keep secrets, you can't keep your money. Like, okay, wait, I've got this idea. There's this world, this different world, this better world, where like if you program things and run them and use numbers and math, like you can do anything, whatever you think of, you can build. And so maybe if we do things in this different world, if our money is numbers, then we can use the right formulas and communicate it to each other. Like we can share secrets without things knowing. Like forget meat space. Like dirt sucks. It's dirty. Like, you know, you can't just program a clever algorithm and like have the dirt all rise and form itself into like the exact perfect shape magically. Like you can't do the same kind of magic. And you know, this is sort of the crypto anarchy vision of the 90s. You know, if you look at the book, The Sovereign Individual, the idea that like, okay, if we just port these key functions to this different world with these different rules, that will fix everything that's wrong with the world. So like, let's do our new money in cyberspace, and then governments won't be able to tax it. Let's make our contracts in cyberspace, and then governments won't be able to affect whether they're enforced or not. Let's share our secrets and make our identities in cyberspace, and then we can define our identities. We can share secrets that people don't want to be shared. We can keep secrets that people don't want us to keep. And this, you know, this is an idea. I mean, part of the idea of this dialectic is that our minds constantly want to simplify things into one model, right? And so this is not necessarily, I'm describing like a viewpoint that one person holds in the extreme, but rather sort of a concept that pulls all of our minds. Like we're constantly each thinking, okay, I could get around this messy dirt thing if I just put it into code, and then everything would be better. And I think that that's laudable, and that's sort of directionally a good way to go, and there are a lot of things that are not in code now that could be in code and would be better. So that's that one view. And now we'll go to the sort of free Ross, or like dark Patri, the like pure meat space view. And the pure meat space view is like, man, you guys in your code, like none of that shit matters. There are people with guns. The people with guns control boxes. And if they do not like what you do, they will find you. They will point a gun at you, and they will put you in a box. And you have to go, because however transcendent you made your virtual life, however many secrets like you kept or protected there, they found you. And if you do not go into the box that the people with the guns say to go into the box, they will, let's talk programming. They'll send a high density, sort of moderate mass object at high velocity towards you. It will hit the center of your neural interlinks, and it will shut down that system. And so you better go in the box. And so the pure meat space view is that like none of that matters. That that there is this nexus for interaction. That and even if we somehow scanned ourselves and uploaded ourselves into virtual reality, like that, those programs would still be running somewhere. Even if you made 1,000 copies of yourself, screw Voldemort and his like 7 copies. Like that's pathetic, man. 1,000 copies, 100,000 copies, like. The wrong supernova, if you haven't exported yourself to another solar system and there's supernova, you're gone. Like, meat space matters. And all of these dreams about this kind of pure, better world that you can build, they're all sort of foolish. They're all, castles built on dirt, and that dirt's going to be taken out from under you, and then, like, mixed metaphors are just going to destroy you, and everything will suck. And, this is something else that pulls us. Like, when you're trying to do things in cyberspace or with code, and then the dirt authorities intervene, like when they they throw those mud bricks at you, or they like chisel the dirt out from under you, and then you can't do what you want to do. But neither of these views are true, right? We live in a world that is a complex intersection between the cyber and meat world, and we kind of, if you want to change the world, if you want to make dirt work better and make meat work better, you have to come to grips with sort of realistically the ways in which these things affect each other. So, for example, you can look at Bitcoin, like to the degree that people agree that these numbers have meaning. We have ways of having numbers just be worth money, and there are real people in the dirt country of Venezuela, which has kind of more dirt and less food than maybe we would like, who are successfully exporting their wealth in the form of numbers and escaping a country and bringing money with them, and that is real. There is WikiLeaks, right? Often the leakers get caught because they left dirt prints, and OPSEC is really hard. But if you have a secret that a powerful organization
does not want you to spread, you can now spread it. That is real. You may get caught, but you can get the word out. So there are real ways in which the virtual world affects the physical one. And if you're interested in, if you find the meat space vision dark and the cyberspace vision appealing, I encourage you to think about these realistic ways in which they're actually kind of intersecting. Like, what are the ways that that the dirt authorities can enforce their will, and in what ways can you put things into code so that the transaction and enforcement costs, right? Look at copyright. It's another example. Like, copyright over movies is basically unenforceable now. That was done with code. That was a change. Like, the dirt authorities would have liked to be able to continue enforcing the copyrights on movies and music, and they cannot. And that is a real thing. And I just encourage everyone to not get into either of these metaphors, but notice when you're drifting towards one or the other, and study the interplay. Because the interplay, it's not something that I could summarize in 5 minutes. It depends on the details of the technology. Like, what is the use case? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to change about the dirt world? How can math affect that? How does it change the incentives? And it's in those details that all of the actual work happens, like in those details for each case. And so that's just a general thing that I want to present, because I feel like a lot of people here are thinking about these two worlds and how they interact, and Christine talked about it. And now I'll talk a little bit more briefly about this same idea applied to the field that I work in, which is kind of starting new societies and trying to make sovereignty more fractal and more individual. So there's the sort of pure pessimist view, and what I encountered a lot of when I started talking about this stuff 20 years ago is like, all land is owned by people with guns. They won't let you do anything. Like, it doesn't matter kind of what you do. You cannot have sovereignty. If what you do is small, they'll ignore it. If it's big, they'll shut it down. If you try to get their permission, they'll either won't give it and will stop you, or will co-opt you to such a degree that what you do does not matter at all. And I don't think that view is true. And then at the other extreme, there's a view which is, wow, look at this magical distributed world that we're creating. Like, we live in a world where countries are talking about becoming blockchain nations and putting their currency on the blockchain, their identity on the blockchain. Where people in random emails are like, hey, this new SEZ was just approved in Indonesia and they're importing British common law, where that's just a thing that happens. And where sort of the magic democratizing forces of technology and the ways in which the world is changing to empower individuals are going to automatically bring about this world where each of us is sovereign, where we can choose our systems of rules, and where annoying people with concentrated dirt weapons that shoot dirt at us really fast cannot stop us from living the life that we want. And I think that this view is not correct either. We live in a world where sovereignty is fragmenting, but the very fact that it's starting to happen, that it's becoming real and not just an idea that we crazy libertarian anarchists transhumanist Silicon Valley nutcases talk about in our weird dinner parties that they make fun of on Valleywag. The fact that this stuff is actually happening does not mean that it is safe. It doesn't mean that it's not vulnerable. It's in these founding moments when things go from being an idea to actually being implemented for the first time and seen by the world for the first time in their real form. That matters. It matters what that real form is. If the first seastead or charter city is a place where the first news story about it is that someone went there to get their baby CRISPR gene edited to make it immune to everything and really, really smart and tall, or if it was my family, really, really short, and then it came out a monster, that's going to really slow down what happens in this space. And if the story is that these places are doing like free medical treatment such that anybody who can get there can guarantee a baby born free of genetic disease. Like if they're making people better and stronger and smarter and doing so in a safe and considerate way that respects humanity and respects the sovereignty of other countries, then I think that these like the first zone will get copied and copied and copied. Like, for example, the United States was with its originally completely insane, crazy democracy system and can affect the world. And so I would just urge everyone not to, it's an incredibly exciting time for this movement because these ideas are actually being put into practice. This stuff is actually happening. And I just kind of urge everyone to treat that not as like a time to relax and be like, okay, everything's fine, but as the time of greatest risk, and to think about how they materialize these things so that we can launch them as quickly as possible and help as many people as possible. So that was just sort of an abstract talk about the things that I wanted to talk about. I know we have like a long panel and a long Q&A session, and I look forward to answering anybody's questions on seasteading and charter cities and blockchain and any of these things. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to open the floor to Tom. So Tom is going to talk about law, and I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion where we get to ask all the questions about law in future societies.
Thank you. Well, I have presentations about my book available online. Just search for Tom W. Bell, and you can see that. I thought tonight, because there's some people here that I've had in my life, people on the panel. Zoltan, you're kind of new. I thought I'd talk about my relationships with these people to illustrate their work and my work, and I promise I won't get too maudlin. I've only had half a glass of wine. If I start crying, I got a handkerchief here. So let's start with Zoltan. Actually, I just met him, but it's pretty exciting to meet a transhumanist who's running for office because you might have noticed Christine Peterson, my old friend Christine Peterson, cited to Extro 3, and about 30 years ago, me and Max Morby started Extropy Institute and Extropy Magazine, and I can't tell you how cool it is now to see happening some of the stuff that we advocated for so long ago. And so Zoltan, I salute you for taking it out there to the public. I gotta say, when we did Extropy, I never foresaw that I would see this strong government thing with transhumanism, but man, you create an idea, it goes out there, and you might be right. So now I'll say something about the Friedmans and my relationship with them, and then also Christine, and also a local institution, because I love San Francisco. I used to live here, Cow Hollow, and so I went over to City Lights bookstore, and I have a way for some of you. I got 2 copies of these here for sale, but there's a way for you to get maybe a free copy over at City Lights, and I'll conclude with that. So very quickly, David Friedman's work inspired me before I went to law school. I read The Machinery of Freedom. Machinery of Freedom. Excellent book. Excellent book. Got me into polycentric law before that was even a phrase. And then I went to law school, and I took a class with David Friedman, computer law. I don't know if he remembers. I'm sure I was in the front row. And I even met Patri at that time, because David had me come over to his house, and I'm sure he read me Kipling poetry, as only David can. And I believe Patri was running around being Patri at that young age, and I was probably being a law student, didn't pay much attention. But he came into my life later. But I'm not done with David, because in a way I see myself, I'm glad I'm speaking between the 2 Friedmans that are here tonight, because I kind of see myself in a way as bridging their work. I mean, I don't mean, between father and son, but I'll explain that, because David Friedman's theory is excellent. Another of his books, his price theory book, underappreciated. I used that to learn about microeconomics before I went to law school. It's a wonderful text, his price theory book. And also he's got I love to read Friedman's work. He's also got a book out in draft form called The Legal System. Very different from our own, which is wonderful also. So his work is mostly theoretical. Only later, again later, I met Patri in a professional context. So David Friedman I see as kind of theoretician, and Patri as certainly a great thinker. I've learned so much from him. I'll tell you about that in a second, but also somebody who's making it happen. And I see myself as in between, as a lawyer, kind of writing the legal code to help, inspired by David, to help Patri do what he wants to do. So, met Patri when he was, were you a toddler then? I don't know. Like I say, I wasn't paying that much attention. But later I was, because I got out in practice and I had been writing about polycentric law, and I became an academic, and I really wanted to get involved because I heard that Patri was doing this great work in Honduras under the RED statute, R-E-D statute. This was the first time Honduras tried to create these special jurisdictions, which you'll hear about a little bit more about in a second. But Patri, I learned in the news, was actually down there with a company, Future Cities Development, Inc., and he was trying, he had a memorandum of understanding with the Honduran government, he was going to build one of these things. So I contacted him. The story is in my book. Hey, my book's disappeared. They're circulating. And I told the story there about adventures I had with Patri in Honduras, metaphorically mostly. And basically I called him up or emailed him and said, Patri, have you got an attorney? And he didn't, and I kind of helped him out. I said, well, you need one. So I worked with Patri in Honduras. Now, I think this shows that maybe the Friedmans are, surprise, surprise, smarter than me. Never start a land war in Asia. Never go up against a Friedman when IQ is on the line. But Patri got out after the RED statute shut down, and he got out of the country, and I kind of hung around. I hung around for the second set of the constitutional amendment and the new statute, the ZA statute. There's my book again. And you can read about that here. I'll just say, we're still working on it in Honduras. It's been like a slogging metaphorically through the jungle and the swamp, and I just have been hacking away at it for years, me and other people. And well, the thing about having clients is, the wonderful thing about clients in this area is they bring me problems, which are great problems. I say to them, that thing you just asked me, not only does nobody know the answer, nobody has ever asked that question before. So I get to sink my teeth into those problems. I love that stuff. But because they're clients, you can't say much about their work. So all I can say in Honduras is the one thing they'll let me say, which is we're making progress. I'll just say it again, we're making progress. And the third time, we're making progress. You watch the news. All right, so that gets us Friedman. Oh, I also want to say Patri has a wonderful book he co-wrote with Joe Quirk. He also is an author called Seasteading, and there's a long subtitle, which I'll never get right, but it's worth reading. And it's true. Great book, very inspiring. My friend Joe Quirk, who couldn't make it tonight, wrote that with Patri. And I've worked on seasteading too. You can read about that in the book too. I basically have a very optimistic view where things are going. And I've worked in the field. You've heard about black swans? I think black swans are something to think about. Thank you, Zoltan. I believe in golden swans. We don't have the cognitive tools to recognize when great opportunities, really fantastic world-changing opportunities are coming down the pike. We're just not designed to do that. Paleolithic humans were not going to find rainbow golden unicorns. They were going to find bears, right, and bubonic plague. So they're looking out for bad stuff. So in my book, you'll hear why I think there's a a probability of great things happening. And now I want to turn to, speaking of great things, Christine and Peterson, who's a friend who got in. I met Christine through the Extropians. I met so many wonderful people. Some of my friends tonight through the Extropians. And Christine introduced me to open source software, the term open source. She coined the phrase open source. And so one of my contributions to this area has been to take Christine's idea of open source software and implement it in the legal context. So I, with some other folks, inspired by my clients really. My clients came to me and they said, we need a legal system for our special jurisdiction in the developing world. We don't want to use a local law. And we don't want to just walk down with some flag, even a Canadian flag, and say, we're going to run this under Canadian law, which sounds great if you're from Canada. Or I guess even if you're from the United States. That's Paul Romer's idea. And guess what? It doesn't sound so great when you're in the country where you're just sticking the flag. Even the Canadians, if you've been at the losing end of colonialism, you kind of get a little antsy when people bring down a flag and put it on your soil. So my job was to create a legal system which was, up to world standards, would be trusted, and didn't have a flag attached. And it turns out you can do that, I guess. At least I've tried. It's called Ulex, and it's an open source legal system, flag-free. And you can go to GitHub, and that's what you do open source, and you can learn more about Ulex. We're up to version 1.1, and the idea is eventually to have, just that we have lots of devices out there running open source software, right? Android's operating system is it's the operating system that's most common in the world, and that's basically at Linux at its kernel, at its core. Someday I'd like to see Ulex kind of doing the same thing with the special jurisdictions that Patri is creating, and that David Friedman thought about so long ago. And so we'll get these wonderful networking effects without flags, thank you very much, which will allow these communities to get economies of scale, network effects, And I think that's kind of looking kind of golden to me. That's a bright future, which if not golden, at least is not black. I would say just a regular swan, as long as it's not dark gray. All right, so with that, I'll stop. You've heard about, I gotta tell you how you're gonna get a copy of the book. You've heard about my relationship with Zoltan, just met you, and the two Friedmans, and Christine. And I want to tell you about the local institution over here, CityChain's books, which I love, of course, but their political views are rather different from my own, bless their hearts. Although I did see a new book by Jason Brennan over there. Jason Brennan's new book. Great book. So they cover some good stuff. Way too much Chomsky for me. Way too much Marx. But so what I did is I took over a copy and I put it on the shelf. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I went over there and I actually dedicated it to them because I love what they're doing. They're helping people learn about ideas. And I don't agree with them all, and that's fine. So the book is on their shelves. You got to go find it. It's not in their catalog. There's no price on it. You work it out. And it's dedicated to them. I don't know, man. I don't know what you're going to do. I just thought it'd be a fun thing to do with me and City Lights and you. Because if you can't get a book here, go over there and work it out with it. Maybe you donate some money. Maybe they say, get that out of here. You'll get a story. And that's all we can hope for. And that's my story and it's with the people that have been in my life and my work. And thank you very much.
Wonderful. And now the last speaker before we go into panel discussion, David Friedman. Please welcome him.
Nice to be speaking somewhere where there are 3 members of my family present, one of them in utero. What? Sure. I've had very little to do. What? Do I really need this device in this little tiny room? Are you recording it or?
Yeah, it's recording.
All right, then I'll use it. I've had very little to do with the Charter City movement. However, one of the things I have been doing for quite a while is trying to understand legal systems. As Tom mentioned, I've got a book that's going to be out fairly soon on legal systems very different from ours, which ranges from the legal system of Imperial China to the legal system of the modern Amish. And it occurred to me that if you have a charter system, a charter city is going to need a legal system. And therefore it would be worth saying a little bit about some of the issues in legal systems that I've come across in the course of investigating a lot of societies. And one interesting one is the tension between private and public enforcement of legal rules. And that exists at a wide range of levels. And the simplest one in our modern society is the distinction between criminal law and tort law. I'm not sure how many of you, other than Tom, realize that you will never be the victim of a crime. It is legally impossible for you to be the victim of a crime. Because if Tom assaults me and the case gets to court, the case will not be Friedman versus Bell. It will be the state of California versus Bell. Because criminal law treats all cases as ones in which the state is the victim. The state then controls prosecution, collects the fine, settles out of court, which we call the plea bargain, and so forth. In tort law, in contrast, the state is still involved, the state still enforces the judgment, but the early stages, figuring out who did it and proving it, are up to the victim or his agent, attorney. So that's one very simple and familiar case where you're doing the same work, in effect, either with a mechanism in which part of it is being done by the state or in which the same part is being done by private individuals. But it goes a good deal farther than that if you look at a variety of societies. One of the ones that I spend a long chapter on is 18th century English criminal law, which on paper is our legal system. That's where we got it from. The only thing is there are no policemen and no public prosecutors. Because in 18th century England, criminal prosecution was private. The enforcement of verdicts was public. However, if somebody stole your horse, it was up to you, or people you employed, to find out who stole your horse, to charge him, to bring the evidence to court, and to convict him. And that system raises a whole bunch of fascinating questions. The obvious one being, why bother, given that unlike the tort system, you don't collect damages. All right, that was the system in which, when it's all over, they hang him. Or maybe they transport him to the U.S., or maybe they give him a pardon and send him home. And I only have 15 minutes. If you're curious about this stuff, the current draft of my book is up on my webpage. My webpage is daviddfriedman.com, pretty easy to remember. And you can read the chapter on 18th century English criminal law, which is a lot of fun. It's got a whole lot of fascinating puzzles in it, including the fact that on paper, essentially the only possible results of a serious crime, if you're convicted, are they either hang you or they send you home. Lots of other things happening in practice. So in any case, that's one example. That's not the only example. It turns out that Periclean Athens also had that system. That in Periclean Athens, the equivalent of criminal cases could be prosecuted by any male Athenian citizen, I think over 30, though I'm not sure if that's correct. I believe it is. They also had the equivalent of tort cases, which could only be prosecuted by the victim or someone acting for the victim. The incentive in that case was that if you prosecuted a criminal case and won, and the defendant paid a fine, the prosecutor got a sizable share of the fine. And that raised an interesting problem. Doesn't that create an incentive to frame people, to find somebody unpopular and rich in order to prosecute them? The Athenians were not stupid. I like to refer to the Athenian legal system as the legal system of a mad economist, because it's full of clever ideas that might or might not work. And one of the ones they had, which you could argue some version of which we might want to use, was that if you could not get 20% of the jury to vote for conviction, the prosecutor got fined. And there was a similar rule in their equivalent of tort law, and we don't know enough to be sure how widely it applied, but at least in some cases, if you failed to convict the defendant of the tort case, you owed him 1/6 of the money that you had claimed he owed you. These are interesting examples where we might learn things from it. My point is only that this is a different way of dividing up the authority, in which the enforcement is still by the state, but the process that leads to the conviction is entirely private. Let me keep on going, but let me take the really extreme cases, which are the ones that first got me interested in this a very long time ago. And that's the societies where not only the prosecution is private, but so is the enforcement. And my original example of that was Saga period Iceland about 1,000 years ago, where if somebody killed your brother, you sued him, and when you got a verdict, you probably didn't get a verdict, you probably settled out of court, but in principle you could get a verdict, and he owed you damages and got outlawed, and once he was outlawed you could kill him. But there was no executive arm of government there. There was nobody to enforce the law. There were simply mechanisms. There was a legislature, there was a law code, there was a court system, but all it gave you was a verdict. Now you can carry this even a little bit farther. Somaliland, the northern part of Somalia, we know a good deal about their traditional system. That one was rather like the Icelandic. It was also a feud system. But in that one, they had what I suppose you might want to describe as open source law, in the sense that any given case was decided by some judge who the people agreed to take, and there wasn't a law code. There was traditional law. And whether or not that judge's interpretation of the law was accepted by people was demonstrated by whether he was ever asked to judge a case again. And I've got an interesting quote from a discussion of Bedouin law, which is describing essentially the same process in which the law code is itself growing out of people stating what they think the fair, just rule is, and it being accepted or not accepted by other people.
Do you know if in either case there was an appeal process?
I don't know about the Bedouin case. In the Somali, there was a procedure for it.
Please repeat the question.
Whether there was an appeals case, and the answer was that at least in the Somali case, there was an appeals process. I don't know a lot of details about it, but again, I've got a chapter on Somalia too. Somalia is a really interesting case because, in fact, the mess in Somalia is our fault, not their fault. We have been attempting to impose, we meaning the UN, supported by the US, has been trying to impose a central government on a
traditionally stateless society, and we've been doing it using the army of their traditional enemies, namely Ethiopia. Not a clever idea. Anyway, that's another story. So in any case, the basic point I'm making is that you have in each of these cases, you've got a set of problems. How do you give people an incentive to enforce things? How do you keep them from gaming the system in ways designed to hurt people? In going back to the English case for a while, they were worried about insufficient incentive to prosecute. That one of the things they did about that was to establish rewards for convicting people for certain offenses. That created the opportunity to frame people for the reward. There was a very famous scandal in the mid-18th century when it turned out a gang of people, the McDaniel gang, had, I no longer remember the number, but they'd been responsible for maybe a dozen people being hanged by setting up, either by entrapping them or by framing them, which resulted in people backing away from the reward system. But let me go, I'm not sure exactly how much time I have, but a little bit. Let me go on a little bit to the purely private systems, the feud systems. Because as I see it, in order for a feud system to work, there are 4 different problems it has to solve. The first is that my threat to harm you if you don't compensate me has got to be more believable when you really did wrong me than when you didn't. You need some mechanism such that right makes might. Otherwise, it just becomes extortion. All right? The basic logic is, you wronged me, I will harm you in retaliation unless you compensate me. That's fine if you really wronged me, but we don't want it to work as well if you didn't wrong me, because then it's just extortion. Second problem you have to solve is a way of making me carry out my threat. So you wronged me, I say if you don't compensate me, I'll harm you. You say you try to harm me and I'll harm you. How do we make it in my interest not to back down at that point? All right. Third problem is, how do we enforce the rights of the poor? So if I'm somebody who doesn't have much access to physical force, who doesn't have a lot of friends and allies and isn't a great warrior, what do I do when somebody wrongs me and I claim I'll harm them in retaliation? And the fourth problem is, how do you terminate feuds? How do you avoid the situation where I think you wronged me, and so I say, compensate me or I'll harm you. You don't think you didn't, so when I harm you, you say, now you've wronged me, and it goes back and forth. And those situations are much less common in the real world than in people's imaginations. If you actually look at the real Hatfield and McCoy case, the original feud ended with 4 people dead, and it was then revived by a state governor who sent a posse into the adjacent state without the permission of that state's governor to arrest people. And then some more people got killed after that. But in any case, all 4 of these problems there are solutions to. Different solutions in different societies, and I discussed that again at some length in the book. So if you think about a modern society, it really has elements of all of these things. That we've got criminal law and tort law. We have not legal feud interactions, but real-world feud interactions. One of the reasons for Apple to be reluctant to sue Samsung if they have a weak case, even though that suit looks very profitable because people will be less willing to buy Samsung phones, but Samsung can also sue Apple. So therefore, in a certain sense, in that system, the mechanism that results in right-making might is the court system. The fact that you might win an IP case even when you're in the wrong, but you're more likely to win it if you're in the right. So in any case, I think the basic point I really want to make is that in thinking about possible legal systems for new societies, you want to think about these alternatives of mechanisms in which the various parts of the law enforcement are done by something like a state, and mechanisms that are done in a decentralized manner, all the way from our standard tort system, which isn't a very radical idea because we do it, to the feud systems, which are historically not radical. I've argued that it may well be that most surviving legal systems were built on top of original feud systems. I've got pretty good evidence for Jewish law and for Islamic law and for English common law, not so good for Chinese law yet. But all of those are interesting things worth thinking about. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, So we're gonna prepare the stage in 1 minute, and then we're gonna invite all the keynote speakers for a panel discussion.
You are
We're not taking a break.
Yeah, let's just
But the fact that they can create bankruptcy laws doesn't mean they don't have the option of saying you can bankrupt for this but not for that.
not for that. And it's so funny. That is what they've done. So,
You as civil disobedience, but I think if you as constitutional law,
so I've already done it. I've already proved myself and have opened myself up to
I think okay, let's take a few minutes.
you need water. Not an experiment I've done.
You really want to talk to a lawyer.
I'm asking philosophical advice.
You want lacrosse?
Oh, I will take one of those. Okay, just because I have wine right now. How long is this one?
What?
How long is this one?
So we're running a bit behind schedule. I think the goal is to finish like 8, 10.
No problem. Sounds great. Just one thing.
Do you need
For that, whatever you want.
Is there another one?
But maybe I found it back there.
Oh, you found it back there? Okay, I might go. Yeah, I prefer the water to the can. If there was.
Water here, and I'll check if we have sparkling.
I giggled at your speech.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, everyone knows.
You're a libertarian, and your famous was the panopticon was it does make sense for transhumanism.
Of course. And I'm a bit of a left-leaning libertarian, so, you know, people know that they give me a little bit of slack up front, but I'm not the hardcore, you know.
Yeah, we are such a diaspora in our own right. Yeah, I guess what concerns me about transhumanism is like, you know, will it be further bifurcation? You know, like, would that be like...
That's like $1 million question. Yes, I mean, that, who knows?
Yeah.
So.
You know, like, if you have access to the best technology, it becomes, right now it's a fiat currency run by extortion. Maybe if we created a society that had less of the state-backed violence to the actual currency itself, and then therefore the victory of such state-backed violence for the currency were not so in control, I'd be much more open and excited about whether I'm open to it or not. You know, I'm so excited about transhumanism. If there was egalitarianism and similar, but egalitarianism, then we all have the same options.
Of course.
You know,
You could raise the national
yeah, no, I agree. We are scattered all across the spectrum. It's really hard to know, what's right and what's wrong. Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I also don't think that Christopher is very much. One of those wait for a lot of them. Otherwise, I'll leave the can the whole time.
My wife.
So what?
I like your enthusiasm.
Thank you. I love philosophy. And I love challenging ideas and perspectives. And I think that we, as a society, will benefit from the value of free speech. If free speech comes with a bullet, well then, whoever took the bullet, whoever chose that action, sure as hell was on acting lawfully. But I will lean on free speech until that day.
Great. That's good. Cool. Right, so let's start, and we're going to do like Q&A, so I'm sure you have lots of questions.
I'm advocating for 3 minutes of time, but if not, it's okay. I just wanted to articulate to people that I'm trying to get us in 2019 and beyond to, if you can't swim with me on January 1st, you can actually take a cold shower or a cold bath to wash off your degenerate skin and step into the possibility of regenerative humankind. It can change law, it can change agriculture, it can change all our systems, reverse our current climate situation, and lead us to the conversation. It's a potential possibility of I volunteer here at I work with Starfish Week. I'm definitely being in relation to fascination and all
Great. Okay. I think we'll have time to give a shout out for during swim, so let's.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right.
Do you need a chair? Do you need a
Standing because I'm the one drinking.
All right, gather back those who got drifted away. Come back.
I've been eating so many chips, I need to run more drinks.
Now is the more interactive part where soon you're gonna have a chance to ask questions. So we're gonna have a quick panel discussion and a Q&A. So think about all the questions and we're gonna get there in a second. All right. So once again, really exciting to see all of you here, and thank you so much for coming. And I guess my first question would be, so we're all in the Silicon Valley, and what do you think? Like, what's the relation? Like, how does Silicon Valley contribute to the future societies, and what's coming out of here, and how is that helping to build our future societies? Does anyone have?
Sure, I'll start. I get a lot of slack for when I travel around and talk, pro about Silicon Valley, just because obviously, as everyone's noticed, top of the stock market now is the giant technology companies and Apple and Google. And for a lot of those people out there who are kind of skeptical of the startup society and what startup ideas and the companies like that, the reality is that the world's getting better because everyone's bringing forth brand new technologies that are making our lives that more functional and efficient. And even if there is a lot of problems that come with it, homelessness and whatnot, it's good that technology moves forward. We can do a better job making equality come together and things like that. But that said, I'm always out there trying to be pro Silicon Valley, and And I find when other people aren't, it kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of where and why we're trying to use technology in the first place.
Technology might benefit us. It is not guaranteed to benefit us. One of the lines that came out of the cypherpunk conversations a very long time ago was encryption is not your friend. It's not your enemy either. It is a technology which opens up certain possibilities, some of which will have good consequences and some of which will have bad consequences. And if people are interested in my view of the general issue of when technology or how technological progress can be bad as well as good, my book Future Imperfect can be read for free from my webpage as well as bought from Amazon, and the final chapter is in part on that question.
When we first were looking at nanotechnology back in the late 80s, that we were in Boston, but we realized even back then that if you want to work on cutting-edge technologies and their social impact, the right place to be was Silicon Valley. So a group of us, including Mark Miller, wave your hand, Mark, he's the one who did that talk, Computer Security and the Future of Law, that I referred to in my talk. We all came together, and the only place in the world we all agreed we could stand to live, so we would be here. So we gathered here and did a bunch of things, one of which is Foresight Institute. Many of you are familiar with it. And we, Foresight, tries to catalyze these ideas, both the technologies and how to handle the social impact. I ran it for many years. Now Allison Goodman runs it. So those of you who like these ideas that I sketched in my talk, or would like to explore the concept of existential hope instead of existential risk or existential angst, Allison is one to talk to on that.
So I have a couple of things, which is that Silicon Valley is a geography, and that geography should not be the quality that we use to define our identity. So how is Silicon Valley related to the way in which we perceive any of these ideas? I think that it's a dynamic cluster of individuals who have aggregated around one place based on economic opportunity, that economic opportunity being consolidated in the way that we perceive value as something material. I think that we are largely becoming disillusioned with the idea that the way in which we can receive or trade or quantify value is something material. And the dematerialization of value is also deconstructing our relationship to place. So I would say Silicon Valley is a cluster. It's a cluster of people, many of whom have resources and that those clusters are emerging everywhere as we become a fully connected global civilization. And to comment on what you were saying about our relationship to, oh my goodness, I just forgot. It's like I looked at you and the thought just flew out of my head. You're like, that's my IP. That's my IP. That's my thought IP. It was actually, no, it was a commentary on your book, and I've totally forgotten, but it's the idea that the way that we relate to each other and the way that we create our societies can be generative, and that the generation of the way in which we establish our economic value to our communities is not something that is extrinsic based on merely our property alone. It's something intrinsic based on who we are as human beings. This is what I was going to say. And when we define our relationship to our humanity based on empathy, we are able to fundamentally reconstruct our relationship to place as a place of belonging, where we feel identified, where we feel embraced and uplifted in our values, rather than a place where we feel we have land or ownership over something, because the only thing you will ever have ownership of really in your life are your actions. And the minute that we shift our relationship to our identity, to actually understand and quantify the meaning and the impact that we as individuals have on each other and on this world, is the moment that we will begin to understand our true value as a human race.
I think Silicon Valley is middle-aged. I'm actually projecting here, but I think, and as being middle-aged, that's a combination of good and bad things. So this is not the time when there's a brand new frontier just to be explored, when like everything is exciting and all the interesting people have come here and everything is new. Now is the time when kind of the largest concentrations of capital and talent are doing sort of older, boring stuff, not the cutting edge things. However, where the place that originally brought together those concentrations still has that concentration, and so in the eddies and the whirls of that world, a lot of new things are happening. And some of it is happening in the places where that world has cast seeds into other geographies, but some of it is still happening here. But it's not happening in the mainstream thrust of it. It's happening in little places like this. So.
So my next question was about. So I really liked this confrontation of meat space and cyberspace. So yesterday we had this whole discussion about future buildings and future cities, and we focused a lot of attention on infrastructure. And I think it kind of touches me, and I think Michael Elliott we were talking about these like float houses and so on. And here we have a lot of thought that everything is kind of moving into, like transforming people into VR and so on. So what do you think is the future? Do we still need to develop the hardware? And I think, like I really liked Patri's idea that, like everything in the end is still in reality, like, like wherever you put that VR is still gonna be stored somewhere. So what do you think about this kind of like development, and where should the infrastructure development go?
Well, that'll give me a chance to tell you about the work I'm doing for my current client, Wireline.io. You can look them up. They're just one example of many companies that are trying to develop basically alternative economic systems that are, yes, blockchain based. I don't want to hit that too hard. I'll be a little tired of you. But I think there's a lot to tokenized economies, and I'm writing now a chapter for a book that's going to come out someday about the future of anarchism. I don't call myself an anarchist, but I do think there's a lot to that idea, and we're headed that way, and that tokenized economics can help us get there. And I'm one of many people trying to build those systems which will be incentive compatible. You've heard Dr. Friedman talk about incentives and how to manage them, and that's what these people in this space think about a lot. We spend a lot of time doing flow charts and thinking about shelling coordination problems, and I think there's a chance it will allow us to have a softer revolution than usual. I do think governments are going to collapse. It's not just the law of physics, but of math. And the question is whether we have to have a Piaget moment, and I don't think we have to if we can transition to a digital economy that is better than the one we're in, less supervised, less controlled. And like those people in Venezuela opting into Bitcoin, be able to make that transition more gently than in the past, hopefully with less blood and violence, and we'll all be better off except some government workers.
We exist physically in real space. The question of whether real space can control us depends in large part on the interface between real space and cyberspace. That we have one set of technologies which is creating a higher level of privacy than we've ever known, basically public key encryption and related technologies. Another set of technologies creating a lower level of privacy than we've ever known, surveillance tech and databases, technology and face recognition. And the net effect of that depends, among other things, on to what degree you can control the link between real space and cyberspace. It does no good to have a video mosquito watching me if everything that happens is invisible because I have a link to the internet which goes through appropriate encryption mechanisms with remailers and all that usual stuff some people must thought up, whatever, 40 years ago or something. On the other hand, if they can observe it, if I'm typing my encrypted stuff into a keyboard and there's a video mosquito watching me type, the strength of the encryption doesn't do me much good. So one of the critical questions in what that future is going to be like is to what degree can you use the one technology without being vulnerable to the other.
Okay, don't say the name, but I'm kind of curious. How many people here know what that structure is called? Just like raise your hand. What that structure is called and why it's designed the way it is.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're pointing at.
That tall metal thing. Raise your hand if you know what it's called. Yes. Okay. I feel like the world of atoms, it's not that I think that the world of bits is not important, but the world of atoms is really important, and it's being neglected. That we live in a time when kind of the advances in the world of bits and the ways of thinking about things with computer science, with modularity and refactoring and algorithms can be brought back and applied to the world of bits, and where we can get a lot of benefit from doing so. So I feel like we need kind of more like meat hackers and dirt hackers and learning about the basic technology stack of dirt. Like, if we can learn the Minecraft like crafting tables, like why can we not learn the civilization technology tree of like actual civilization? So it's bits are important, but I think that like dirt is underinvested in.
So Patri, what's that called?
It's called a truss, and it's the most space and materials efficient way to support a load using a compression material.
That's cool.
So I also have to say that while there was something mentioned about Venezuelans using Bitcoin, and this is hard for me to talk about. It's actually, I feel emotional when I talk about this, because the largest ICO raised to date is the ICO for the Venezuelan Petro. And this is fundamentally corrupting our technology. This is what I was going to say earlier, that technology is a tool, and the idea that encryption is not our friend, it's a technology, is very true. Because we as human beings, if we don't solve how dumb we are, we're never going to change anything, okay? Everyone in this room has been through something, or taught something in a wrong way. Everyone's been hurt, everyone's cried, everyone's had pain, everyone's had something real happen to them. But we don't have the infrastructure for people to deal with that in a way that's effective, and so we fight. So we use the legal system to say, create a middleman between me and my pain. Because I don't know how to deal with this anymore. I don't have the tools to deal with this. I don't have the support to deal with this. I don't have the understanding of how I can deal with this. So I'm just gonna put someone in the middle of me and my pain, whether it's the pain you've caused me or the pain I've experienced before that's causing me to be in this situation. And through our abstraction of our human purpose and principle as the loss of empathy, we have become this Darwinian Frankenstein. You know, Darwin didn't actually say survival of the fittest the way we imagine it. He said that in The Descent of Man and 2 chapters before. Darwin also said that one of our strongest skills for survival, group survival, is empathy. Altruism is actually what he said, qualities we now identify as compassion. And that's really the quality that binds us together. And the idea that we have incorporated systemic infrastructure into the foundation of our world that negates empathy as a fundamental principle of the way that we are interrelated is the reason why we live in a society of corporate or other institutional sociopathy. And so if we want to change the world, and if we want to change the systems, and if we want to redefine this, we have to start from where it is most true to every one of us, every person in this room, which is in redefining ourselves, reconnecting with ourselves, re-enlightening and re-enlivening ourselves. Because if you do not have an atomic structure within the core of your own emotional, physical, psychic, energetic being that is in tune with something more dynamic than what the sum of your own traumas is, you will never be able to fractally integrate with healthy systems ever. Why do we integrate with unhealthy systems? It is because the fractal of our own energetics and our own psychology is so disconnected from what it means to be human that we have forgotten how to live. So if you want to solve the problems of the world, take a step back. Ask first if you have solved the problems in yourself. And if you have not, then you have to face those before you can really think about what it means to restructure a new civilization.
Just to back up what Patri was saying about the physical world, and the value of working in the dirt space.
one thing that we work on at Foresight is healing the planet and healing our bodies. And these are problems of atoms. Bits can help, and we want bits to help as much as they possibly can because it's much easier to juggle bits than atoms. Much easier. So you want to use as much of the bits as you can. But the fact is, if you want to clean up the atmosphere, or if you want to heal a human body, this is about atoms. There's no way around it, right? So you have to get your hands dirty in the dirt and arrange those atoms the way we want. That's what Foresight works on. That's what Allison works on. And so come see us if that's what you're into. And if you want to hear more about healing bodies, Tanya, you also do that. So put your hand up. Yeah, come see Tanya.
And I just want to say, when you're talking about meat space versus something that's data, I think technology and frankly capitalism under these circumstances, not that that's good or bad, will fix this. Ultimately speaking, we're going to have companies that bring out either implants, headsets, different types of communication tools that are connected directly to our thoughts and to our minds. It's just not really a matter of time. There's lots of money being poured into it already. And when that happens, we're not going to have the choice. Well, obviously we'll always have the choice, but it's sort of like the choice if you're in the executive world of using Facebook or not, or using a car to get to work or not. We're going to take whatever is most efficient and functional, whatever technology is available to make us most productive. And if that means using some type of implant or headset or technology that allows us to connect our brains to one another, we're going to do that. And once that happens, this idea of the meat space dissolves quite quickly. We'll be more in augmented realities, virtual realities, and even if we are in the meat space, it's such a conjoined reality with all these other different types of realities that it becomes something very different. And I think that's really important to understand that a lot of some technicians, engineers, scientists, they're saying that probably in 10 to 15 years, this will be here. And frankly, if we don't use this technology, we'll probably all be out of a job anyways, because robots and other types of entities like that will do a better job than us.
If the bullet is in real space and your shield is in virtual reality,
you wanted to...
So I really love this context of meat space versus, like bit space, as if they're really separate. When they're built on top of an economy, it does not include externalities. We have bit space that's built on top of extraction of resources from children in Africa to build the cobalt to make sure we all have our little phones. You know what I mean? So slave labor is built into this that is very human, is very atom space, and where our bit space fails to recognize the economic implications of such atrocities. I just want to touch base whether that reality is being touched upon here, or whether we're just kind of floating around in false philosophical land in this current governance structure.
So this was also going to be my feedback about the idea that robots are taking our jobs. And that is that we've created a new economic system in which value is something more intrinsic and less material. The idea that what is valuable to us is what we can touch is an illusion. Just like the idea that who we are is what we can touch is an illusion. Because we are all made of something more fundamental, and that is an energetic field. And that energetic field has the resonance and presence that exists beyond the realm of the physical body. And the idea that we perceived our relationship to the physical body is the only way in which we can become further enlightened, that our relationship to our transcendence of our humanity becomes the replication of our physical form is utterly fundamentally an illusion. The idea that our physical form is what's meaning about us. It's not. It's our energetic, because that energetic is something transformative that cascades beyond the realm of what is merely explicative or capable to be quantified in our own being. And that the future of the way we think about our economy is not related to physical space, is the data economy, which is how Facebook and Google have become multi-billion-dollar enterprises, is something that we will be able to quantify in a way that we've never been able to take ownership over before, because blockchain provides the ability for us to take sovereign ownership over our identity. And in that sovereign ownership, we are no longer interfacing with companies on the process of extraction, which is unethical and has destroyed our planet. but on the process of consent. I consent to give you my data, and in the process of consenting to give you my data, I may receive economic value. If I do not consent to give you my data, I can give economic value to another system, but what I choose to do is fundamentally within my own sovereignty and my own will. And this shifts the perspective that we have on the idea of monopolization and resource, jobs, and ownership in a way that provides the ability for any person in the world to become an artist in their own right, to create value in the way that they choose to share it, and thus refractalize, in one word, or relocalize the idea of the way in which we interrelate into our interdependence as economic systems, as human life, and as forms of value. We are beyond individuals, we are an ecosystem, and if you destroy one component in that ecosystem, you fragment the ecosystem in and of itself. So the minute we are able to gain enough information to understand our interdependence is the minute that we will begin to reformulate our economic capacity to both have jobs, to redefine labor, and to take ownership, not in a way that takes from others and extracts from our earth, but in a way that generates more value for all. That is the promise and the potential power of blockchain. So it's up to every person in this room to make sure that happens by opting out of systems and incentives that take from you without asking you to do something meaningful.
Value has never been physical. Synthetic sapphire and natural sapphire are the same arrangement of atoms. They're both corundum, but they have very different values and have had very different values for quite a long time.
I really appreciate the reminder that these topics that we have are kind of grounded in a reality, like what's good and bad for actual people. You know, I feel like we've kind of been glossing that over because we're talking at a higher level of abstraction, but you know, I'll channel Tyler Cowen for a moment and say that these questions of like, how good are our institutions, how well are things arranged, are the questions of like, do people live in houses with walls made of mud, or walls made of brick, or walls made of steel? Like, do people get, you know, healthcare and nutrition so that they can live to 40, or to 60, or to 80, or to 100 and beyond? Like, all of these questions are rooted at a ground level in benefit for humans in the world of atoms. You know, we're just talking at kind of a different level of abstraction about how to arrange things such that we can maximize that flourishing. So it's kind of all grounded in what you've said, and I think it's great you reminded of us of it, because it's all based on that. Like, if it weren't for that impact on humans, then none of us would care about any of this crap. You know, we're just talking about it at another level.
So maybe, okay, one more question, and then I have a few questions, and then we're going to go for a Q. Thank you.
Well, this is a question for David and one for Tom. David, in your view, is there an optimal level of reliance on precedent in law? Of course, we want law to evolve with society. It seems like if there's too much focus on precedent, the law won't evolve, and if there's no focus on precedent at all, it'll be unpredictable. And so it seems like it's kind of a Goldilocks problem, and I'm wondering if, as the pace of innovation accelerates, does that have some implication for what's the optimal level of precedent?
I think if I understand you correctly, let me get this. If I understand you correctly, I think I would agree with what you're saying. That is, what the optimal level is will depend on features of the society. If you imagine a society where conditions are changing very, very slowly, then in a sense, once you've got the right rule, the advantages of maybe tinkering with it are probably very small compared to the disadvantage of uncertainty. If you have a society where the conditions that are relevant to the legal rules are changing very rapidly, on the other hand, now you want to put less reliance on precedent. I mean, just think about the question of whether water in a river is a scarce resource. All right, there are some environments in which the fact that I draw water out of the river to water my crops doesn't affect anybody downstream, because there's 100 times as much water as we can use. In that environment, you don't want to have legal rules which require me, in effect, to have permission from people downstream. If the environment changes in such a way that the water becomes a scarce resource, now you would like to develop legal rules which take account of that resource, allocate that resource. So I would have said that yes,
the appropriate level of reliance in precedent in a legal system depends a lot on the environment it's functioning in.
And this is directly analogous to exploration versus exploitation in AI.
I did have a related question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, for Tom. And then, Tom, I should know the answer to this question because I read Your Next Government and enjoyed it very much and was much informed by it. And I also particularly loved the wit in the book. It's a really fun book to read. Here's my question, Ulex. Does it primarily consist of bits of law that have either been used successfully or unsuccessfully or have withstood the test of time? Or does it consist of examples of rules for enabling law to evolve? Or perhaps a combination of the above?
Thank you, John. I enjoyed your book too. You release your inner entrepreneur.
Unleash your inner company. Thank you.
Unleash your inner company. And it's full of wit, but also moving stories. It's a great book. I mean, I was like getting a little teary reading these stories about being an entrepreneur. I totally didn't expect that. But to answer your question, mostly Ulex takes rules from established sources where the rules are written down, and you don't have to trust me. You can trust me, but you don't know that. So you shouldn't assume you can trust me. You shouldn't assume you can trust anybody. And so the benefit of Ulex is you don't have to say, oh, I like Tom, so I like his rules. You say, I like the American Law Institute, which you might have mixed feelings about, but the point is they're more reputable than me. It's like an august body that's been around for many decades, full of judges and attorneys, learned commentators on the law. And they're the ones who came up with the rules, for example, that I use in Ulex. Most of those rules are written down. I just kind of walked through the library in my basket and said, oh, I need some tort rules. There they are. Oh, I need some corporate law. There's a few rules I kind of wrote, but they're very short, they're easy to digest, and I cite what I'm interpreting, and they're not debatable. Now, as to how the system evolves, I don't build into Ulex a common law system of precedents. That is it's just a kernel of an operating system, right? It doesn't have the whole operating system. That's for the people who design the whole system to decide on. Some of them might say, we don't want courts kind of going off the rails and making up their own rules. We have, an august body of directors who do that. And others might say we want a more organic system. The last thing to say about it is on GitHub, of course. So it's open source. And so if you don't like version 1.1, come up with 1.1a. I got nothing to say about that. There's not even a copyright in it. Well, that's actually complicated. But I won't sue you for any copyright violations. So thanks for asking. I don't know if that answers your question.
I have a question.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Just really briefly, why are we opting into a society that believes that one institution, which may or may not have committed crimes based on public opinion, to be more reputable than an individual who may actually have character and behave as an upstanding citizen? And I think that there's I can appreciate the respect, the mutual respect for institutions that have upheld a certain level of principles. And yet I question the idea that these institutions are absolute and that these institutions have ethics, because they don't. A corporation is not a person, although it is legally seen as such. And they're certainly not put under the same kinds of legal prosecution that a person would for murdering millions of innocent people, destroying our planet, brutally slaughtering various forms of life, or causing human beings to ingest chemicals in our meat industry that could potentially cause cancer. So I just wanted to make a brief comment or pose a question as to why we respect institutions over individuals without a certain level of investigation for how those institutions, like law, are exploiting, I don't mean to be explicit, but like poor black communities, where you can pay off a police officer if you have 20 grams of coke and you're a white collar person, and you get 20 years in jail for smoking weed if you live in the ghetto. So I question the values of these institutions to the extent they have exploited other forms of human life. As human life is not a color, it's not a race, and it's not a creed. It is a form of life. And the idea that we've exploited life in the benefit and the pursuit of the individual taking ownership over it is fundamentally unethical. So that's just a question I'd like to raise
in terms of our ability to have our own right to question institutions and to own our right or our credibility as individuals as well. Just a question I might like to ask.
I don't think that institutions should not be criticized, but every institution is made up of and serving a group of individuals. And I think that we, as a group, make institutions to do things that are more than what any one person can do. Like, you know, the oldest person has lived for like a little over 100 years. I think that it's good to have institutions like groups of laws and customs and resources that are 200 years old, and we don't have a way of doing that with single neat bodies. I think that we need ways of doing things that are more than what each of us can do alone. Those ways of doing things should not be like not under scrutiny. They should be questioned, they should be evaluated, they should be held accountable, they should have to have enough resources to account for the damage they do. But I don't think that we should fragment into atomized individuals who don't coordinate, just because sometimes people do bad things. Sometimes individuals do bad things too.
Just to speak to that, I saw over in City Light's book, it says the corporations are not people. Obviously, they're not natural people. But let me just point out how dangerous an idea it is that corporations don't have legal rights. Because there is a big entity that's not going to go away, and it's called government. And it is an unnatural person. And if we get rid of corporations, we don't have a way to band together to defend our rights. It's just each of you and I alone against the largest, most powerful institution that has ever existed on this planet. It is immortal and unnatural, and it's not going to go away. So if they take away rights to corporations and cooperative organizations and all kinds of charitable organizations, you can kiss those other rights goodbye too.
People who benefit from corporate work are individuals, little people, teachers, and
businesses bound together making this.
Sure, and you know, I spent the early part of my career with National Geographic and the New York Times covering war zones, and I can tell you one thing that a lot of people desperately miss in the middle of a war zone is our institutions. And I'm not saying they're great. I think institutions should be criticized, you know, day in and day out, and try to evolve and try to change them, try to make them better, because it's true. Many of them are corrupt. Many of them have done some terrible things. But if anyone's been to war zones and seen what real anarchy looks like, it gets desperate really, really quickly. You see people, children, women, everything that terrible can happen to these things. And so when people start building these things decades after decades, even if they're not perfect, they're often quite a bit better than being on the ground in some kind of conflict zone when you can just get shot in the dark and your body rots there for days on end. Institutions in that sense have been something that have protected us, but again, we should always be incredibly vigilant to evolve them.
So I think we're going to go faster with more questions.
Really, really, really quick. This isn't my point, and everything that everyone just said is, I feel like there's a gap in understanding, so I just wanted to close that. My family's indigenous, and we lived in harmony with the earth and with all peoples before we had institutions that were actually taking and commoditizing rights, whether those institutions or government. If you really want to talk about sovereignty, please talk to my dad, who's an indigenous elder, whose father was born on Standing Rock Reservation, and who leads the Dakota and the Chickasaw. So if you want to really talk about sovereignty, have a conversation with an indigenous elder. And the idea that we actually lived in harmony without the need for institutions to exploit different forms of human life is actually my point underneath this, that if we connected more with each other as a human race and we connected more with ourselves, then institutions might not exploit people to such an extreme. And I'm not saying that we should take away rights from people, and I'm not saying we should take away rights from institutions. I'm saying that we should question the purpose of life, and we should question our connection to each other and to the planet before we declare that the rights of an organization are more important than the rights of a group of people who may have done a better job stewarding the earth. I think if we sacrifice the idea and look at who's making more money or who has more ownership instead of who's doing a better job, who's actually taking care of our planet, whose people are happier, okay, whose people are living more in joy, what community is dealing with the lowest amount of police violence and brutality. I think that the minute that we proclaim that institutional rights take more value over human life and human happiness is the minute that we lose ourselves in everything that is, and it's actually the minute that we become inhuman. So I just wanted to be really clear that that was my point, and my point was not that we should take away rights from institutions, but that at the root of who we are human beings, and institutions are institutions, which are groups of human beings, but that the value of human life and the happiness of human life is the thing that we should value more than the idea of our own self-interest or economic gain. I just wanted to be clear about my point.
Thank you, Tony. I think Tanya had a question, and then.
Well, I had kind of an observation, and I don't know if this is possible with the combination of possibly a blockchain approach to a legal system, or hold on, I was taking notes, and AI possibly. In the field of medicine, there's an emerging movement for something that's called evidence-based outcomes. And I think that is highly applicable in legal systems, but I have no idea if you can even begin to apply it. Possibly if you're starting from scratch, it's possible. But what I see is everything is encoded, everyone is treated equally. So politicians who make the rules can't exempt themselves from them, for example. But I also see, in order to determine if a law is good or bad on the people that it's impacting, if there's some way to establish kind of a little sandbox or AI analysis so that you can evaluate the impact of a law before it becomes embedded in a blockchain. So get the data that determines whether or not a law is going to be good for people, or for the majority of people, because no law is going to be good for everyone. How do you feel about the idea of evidence-based, data-driven legal systems?
One of the things that legal scholars sometimes do is try to evaluate the consequences of alternative legal rules. So the two cases where I have seen articles looking at it, and it's not simple and you can't be sure the answers are right. One of them is what's referred to as the English rule versus the American rule, where the question is, I sue you and win or lose, who pays for whose lawyer's fees? And the English rule, oversimplifying a good deal, is that the loser pays the lawyer fees of both sides, and the American rule is each side pays another. And I saw at least one article where they looked at, I think it was in Florida, where for some odd reason, for some period of time, they were using something close to the English rule for a long time ago, I can't give you the details, but for some subset of cases, and tried to see did that end up working better or worse in the ways people thought. I've also seen people attempt to do the same thing for no-fault auto insurance. So it is not impossible. Your sandbox isn't really a sandbox. Your sandbox is some part of the world where somebody did something. To take a less clear example, except it's one that I, in some sense, did, I was trying to figure out whether the privately prosecuted criminal law in the 18th century resulted in more or less deterrence than the publicly prosecuted law at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. And I have some very poor numbers on what murder rates were. And it looks as though murder rates fell quite sharply between, I suppose, about 1500 and 1750, and as though murder rates in 1900 were probably not very different than they were in 1800. The English police system of police having come into existence about 1830. So that was a case where I got a little bit of evidence. But these are very complicated systems. Real world experiments, there are always lots of other things changing. In that particular case with different systems, we don't really know if our measurements of the murder rate are directly comparable. Maybe at one point they were only counting some of the murders and others. So I don't think there's a neat, easy, clean way of doing it, but legal scholars do at least sometimes try to measure the effects of alternative legal rules.
Okay, I gave two answers. So one is futarchy. So one is the idea that, like, if we define a metric, an outcome, like, you know, the number of life years that people in society live, you can have a prediction market on whether certain rules will maximize that outcome. Like, we can bet on if we pass law A versus B versus C versus D, like, what will this metric be as measured by some agreed upon body, and then implement the rule that maximizes it. So that's one example. And the other example I gave is sort of the you know, application of computer science sandboxing principles, like software engineering practice with competitive governance, and that's the idea that, like,
Absolutely sandboxes. So, if you have a new idea for a new law, just like if you have a new piece of software to run Amazon web servers, or a new medication for the quality of your arteries when you're 70, you should not try any of these things for the first time on an entire population at once. You should try it on a smaller group of people and scale it up based on what the risk reward and what the error bars look like they are. And I feel like all I've been doing for 20 years is kind of telling people to apply these same economic and software principles to law. So we should be doing exactly the same thing. We should take a certain zone, try a different law in that zone and in other zones, and see what happens. And if a certain law works out well, we should scale it up to more zones and kind of continue. And if a certain law works in one country, then maybe other countries can copy it. And this question of evaluating in advance what a given rule will do, it's not trivial, right? It takes thought and it takes experimentation, but our systems are not very good at it. I mean, I look at communism as an example where they tried a brand new approach for coordination on hundreds of millions of people, and as a result, 100 million people died. That was not a good sequence of experiments. It's they rolled out their dev code to all of the processors, and it had a bug and everything crashed. So I absolutely think we should be doing that same thing with law.
My favorite blogger, Scott Alexander, had a review of my book, Machinery of Freedom. It was a generally friendly review. And at the end of the review, he said that he hoped that my system for a stateless society would be tried somewhere far from him.
Where does he live? Because I might want to go somewhere else. Quickly. You can actually test some of this stuff in the lab at Chapman University where I work. We have the Economic Sciences Institute headed by Vernon Smith, Nobel laureate. And they actually, Vernon Smith, empirical economics. They actually have labs where they put students in cubicles with computer interfaces and they test out economic rules. And I'm actually trying to get them hooked up with some of my clients in the blockchain space so that we won't have something like the Genesis Dow disaster happen again. I mean, it's not as bad as communism, but what the hell?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, you couldn't have done a lab test, and so someday soon, instead of these crazy rollouts of code, we're going to see people with certifications, lab tested. That's going to happen. Maybe I can help that happen. Another thing, these ZEDEs in Honduras, I've been trying to get grant money to do this. We need to establish a baseline of data now, the before, so that we can see this natural experiment work. There's going to be little places in Honduras where they're running common law, and right across not even the border, the fence, they'll be running civil law. We need to see how that works out. And I'll stop there. 2 points is it.
I have two, just really quick.
One sentence.
Yeah, sure. So it was a $50 million hack. All of the money was returned. I've done a lot of time in Honduras, and the Honduran government is too complicated to work with to effectively pass a free economic zone at this point. And maybe we're measuring the wrong things with data and law. Maybe we're measuring all of the wrong things, and maybe what we're measuring in terms of what's actually meaningful and valuable for human life is the idea of self-interest is fundamentally inhuman. Maybe it's fundamentally unethical, and maybe we've evaluated our place in society in a way that's completely wrong. We always lived in a stateless society before people decided that they wanted to be selfish and claim ownership over everything. We lived in harmony and peace, even though there was, it's not like the world was ever without its problems. But we lived in a stateless society for most of unwritten human history, and I just want to acknowledge that there's a voice of an entire people that have been exploited and taken advantage of that's not being given voice to in the conversations about sovereignty, because these are still the people that are living on land that have been robbed of their ownership by the state, and that if we want to make some change, people should really band together with other people who have been exploited and taken advantage of in a way that can evaluate what it means to be, reevaluate really what it means to be human instead of what it means to be ourselves. Because I think being human is more important than being one radical self-identity and taking ownership over everything.
I just want to say quickly, when I've run my campaigns and also anything from the Transhumanist Party, which I'm also an advisor at, we run it based on the scientific method. And that's how we try to create policies, entirely based on the scientific method. And I hope when you go to vote next time, you'll look for candidates that really look for reason, science, and technology to make their decisions. I think it will be a lot better in place.
Question?
Both kind of question and a comment. First of all, every government on earth is mortal and destructible.
Yes.
Every one.
Totally agree.
History says that every government on earth is mortal and destructible. It just takes enough people to turn their turrets the other way. I thought of the idea of the money. The cryptocurrency is the future of the money, and in my opinion, what if everybody would get issued a billion of their own coin, and through how they express themselves in this world, give value to their coins? So this is a way to kind of like fund yourself through a coin that you issue and value that you provide to the world. And market economy by itself will make, say, this person is valuable enough and this person is maybe less valuable. I'm sure there should be like bottom point where, you know, people who are who cannot produce anything should be starved to death. And also, instead of calling it meat space, maybe we can call it beautiful human space. Beautiful human body space. That's all.
I like that. Beautiful human space. Perfect.
I think there's something really interesting with what you said about how kind of our like ideals for blockchain and for markets can clash with like the realities. It's like there's some ideal of everybody issues a coin and then we're kind of like magically all worth something. But the reality of how we would use a market-based system to issue individual coins is that you would do things like selling a share of your future income in order to fund your education and then have an exact market price on both what you were worth in economic terms and on how that education would change you. I think that that's a good thing, that we waste a lot of money on education that's not actually of economic benefit, but I feel like a lot of people who are kind of into the idea of you know, us all issuing coins and having value, like might not be into the reality of having an actual dollar measure. And yeah, let's think about the reality and not just the ideal.
Sure, go.
I'm just wondering, I think a lot of people here are interested in creating new types of legal systems. And probably, I guess, this question for David, that interesting from everyone. To what extent do you think that the process of designing a legal system has resulted in outcomes that reflect those intentions? And how, you know, like if we sit here and try to name 10 different qualities that we want a legal system to have, and then set something in motion, in your research, have you actually seen a strong correlation between those two things, and how would you recommend intentional go about setting up a new system?
I'd like to hear from other speakers on this, but I'll answer quickly because I think about this. I'd say most legal systems that you see are not by design. They basically have evolved under institutional pressures that really don't look out for our benefit. That's not a surprise. Probably things to say about that, sir. The legal systems that actually work best are those designed by people who want to form intentional communities, by which I mean sometimes you're thinking communes, and that can be an example, but also things like, say, a church. A church has a lot of control over your life. It determines your diet, who you marry, where you go after you die. Churches really regulate a lot of behavior, and their governments, because they are governments, are basically designed by people who sit down and think and talk amongst themselves. You know, how do we want to do this? Do we want to have a bishop? Do we want to be able to form our own catechisms? And those systems work pretty well. So systems where you can actually sit down with the people you're going to have a government with and say, how are we going to do this? It can go off the rails, of course, as people. But you can intentionally design a system of government for a small community at least that does work as the people intend. I don't have as much faith about bigger political entities just because I just think they're unwieldy. They don't seem to work, and the evidence is in, and basically they kill a lot of people and they wreck economies. So that's what I say about that.
One pretty good example of designed legal systems would be the articles of the pirate ships. Peter Leeson has a book on 18th century pirates.
Invisible Hook.
Yeah, it's a terrible title. That's a separate issue. Yeah, but it is not analogous to the Invisible Hand. It's a neat book. Anyway. And I read it. And I read it before
before you did, because I remember the referees. But in fact, the pirate ships had written articles describing the rules for that ship. They were designed. They had an incentive, namely they wanted to get people to join the ship, which the people got to read the articles. And they did not necessarily work well from the standpoint of the people they were pirating on, but that wasn't what they were designed for. They seem to have worked tolerably well. Similarly, if you think, if you think of the legal rules of a corporation, there are lots of examples where an organization is creating legal rules such that the people who are going to be bound by those legal rules are volunteering to be so. And they then have an incentive to at least try to make legal rules that will be attractive to those people. In terms of big-scale legal systems, there are some that are identified with somebody's name, the Code Napoleon or the Justinians. But as far as I don't know enough about the Code Napoleon, but I think most of those are really somebody who hires a bunch of people to compile the existing law and give some version of it. So I don't think offhand that I know of any where I'm sure there are individual rules that were decided by a particular person. Don't know. I just don't know enough about it. But I would say that in most cases, at least, as Tom was saying, that legal rules evolved over some period of time with a bunch of different people making contributions, and it's not clear that their incentives were to make good rules from our standpoint. If you just think about the ordinary economics of when you do or don't get efficient outcomes, you tend to get efficient outcomes when individuals who make decisions bear the net cost of those decisions. And that is rarely the case for legislation.
Weren't the pirate rules probably a mix of evolution and design?
I'm sure they often copied each other, but any particular set somebody wrote down for that ship.
So there are, I guess, constructed rules in free democratic schools, maybe, and some other kinds of schools. I don't know if you've researched that.
First-hand research is the school
disaster.
The school did not work well.
Yeah, I am kind of interested. I was trying to start a alternative education business and community because I think a community is kind of where learning can happen more organically. But anyway, I was also wondering if the tools that you're making for free cities or the startup cities or whatever could be used on smaller scales for communities that are trying to build, if the tools work for small communities, and I guess I'll stop there.
So, what was exactly the question?
Well, I was asking if there are tools that could be used for communities that are trying to build, say, educational and entrepreneurial sort of community that might have long-term ambitions of trying to improve their local area and expand out. Because I think so. One thought I had was part of the government structures that we have. They exist because of our culture, the way it's kind of a consequence of the culture of the people and the history of the people. And I think improving parenting and education are incredibly important to having people grow into people who are confident and taking control of their lives, and, knowing that they can solve their problems in different ways than are the norm. Like having schools that are kind of experimental in how they solve their problems, that sort of thing, I think are important. But like David, I'm a little skeptical of just relying on democracy. I think they need to be more entrepreneurial in how they experiment, sandbox political.
The best mechanism we know of for running organizations is competitive dictatorship. That's the way we run restaurants, right? I have no vote at all on what the restaurant has on its menu, but an absolute vote on whether I go there.
And I think that if you wanted to do a radical schooling system right, the ideal way would be to have a large enough population so that there were half a dozen or a dozen schools, each of which belonged to some entrepreneur who created it, and if it didn't turn out that kids and parents liked it, he goes broke.
How do you make it competitive so that it doesn't become like one dictatorship?
Well, have you observed that there's only one restaurant in San Jose? San Francisco?
Well,
I mean,
different tastes?
Not just different tastes, but the usual, with rare exceptions, in most fields, diseconomies of scale become significant at a size much smaller than the total size of the market. There are exceptions to that, but most activities, unless you have a very small population, if you've got a single general store in a small town with 4 cars, that's likely to be a natural monopoly. That's the exception.
Yeah,
of course, I'm a natural monopoly.
I agree for restaurants. I'm just thinking like in terms of Google or...
But for schools, he was asking about schools.
It's different in every field.
There's no reason why San Francisco couldn't support 50 different private schools.
Do you want me to answer that question since you asked me? Yeah. Since you asked that question to me, I'll go ahead and answer it. But yes, that is what we're working on, and that is what we're building. Is the idea to understand how a microcosm affects a macrocosm through the ownership of sovereign identity, community stewardship of sovereign identity, restoration, and emergent governance. Yes, that is what we're working on at Culture. Thank you for asking.
All right. Any more questions? Yeah.
I have a question that builds on what David just said. One of the most prominent features of the current technological moment is that it creates power law dynamics, or winner take all dynamics. And so we see that the economy is increasingly dominated by these big technological firms. People know the names like Microsoft, Google, Facebook. Is there a way to design technological and legal systems to avoid those kinds of outcomes to the extent that we don't like them? Or is this just sort of a permanent feature of the future of human economic development?
Neither. That is, it is not a permanent feature. Under some circumstances, you have natural monopolies, and there probably aren't very good ways of preventing them because you have a natural monopoly when one firm can produce a service at a higher quality or low cost than 10 firms. On the other hand, there's no particular reason why technological progress automatically leads to that. That I think the general pattern over the last century or so has probably been to the decreasing concentration, not increasing concentration. When Morgan put together U.S. Steel, it had, I think, a majority of the industry, and it's down to whatever it is, 2% now. So I assume that in the future you will occasionally have areas where there are natural monopolies, and you're going to live with them, whether they're unregulated, regulated, or government monopolies. None of which work very well, but I don't think there's any reason to assume that the future, any more than the past, will be dominated by monopolies. You will notice that Apple, although a very large firm, produces a minority, a fairly small minority of all cell phones and all computers.
Yeah, fundamentally, this is a question about like economies of scale and diseconomies of scale, and it's different at different times and different industries. And just so there's not a simple answer, right? Because it depends on those details. And but just if you're interested in kind of getting into the question, like a common economy of scale is when you have some fixed cost that's divided over a certain number of things. So where the larger you are, the more that fixed cost is small for every unit. And then a standard diseconomy of scale would be the dynamics that you see in like the office. Diseconomy of scale is like when organizations get big, they get poor at maintaining their own interests and making decisions. Many people within the organization exploit them. And that these two forces battle. And that one cool thing that seems to be happening nowadays with technologies, like with software, is that there's that you have both. But there's these economies of scale in terms of things that operate much bigger have an advantage in terms of like just unit economics. But at the same time, the larger things still suffer from these organizational tendencies of when they get big, they get stupid and they get taken advantage of. And so we seem to be seeing kind of this system where it's like temporary monopolies, or because of economies of scale, some business gets very, very large and takes over one industry, but then it gets stupid and doesn't last very long and something else replaces it. And that just, happens to be because of the economies and diseconomies of scale in the early 21st century. And, it's going to change as technology changes both of those factors.
50 years ago, we all knew that IBM was going to control the computer industry.
Okay, we're gonna do one more question and then we're gonna have mingle. So if the speakers stay, you can ask them all the questions you like. So go for it, sir.
Can we get Mark to introduce himself, by the way?
Yes.
Mark, could you please introduce yourself for the audience so they know who you are?
Okay. My name is Mark Miller. I've been associated with Foresight, working on smart contracts, all this stuff since the 80s, 1980s. I'm recently left Google to form a startup named Agoric to pursue smart contracting in a world in which suddenly, after 30 years of working on it, people are interested. And I'm finding that what got them interested was something that has a lot of problems that our paradigm of smart contracting didn't have. Our paradigm of smart contracting had other problems, and that the two paradigms together, our notion of smart contracting had no blockchain. The two paradigms together, they solve the places that there were holes in the other one, and I think we're building something very strong. So I took an opportunity for a commercial plug there. As Christine mentioned, my interest in smart contracting was very much a vision of what I called computer security as the future of law. And I don't mean a simple one-way takeover of law by software. I mean much more of a organic interplay between the world of law and the world of software as they constrain and influence and adapt to each other, and that the two together, co-adapting, create the systems of rule-like frameworks that is what serves the function that we currently call law in future society, and that we're very much in a James Madison moment where we get to design the architectures that become entrenched in those future legal systems. So that was not my question.
That was the introduction.
The question is, what do you think of that?
Yeah. So my question is, there's another kind of economy of scale that leads to organizations at very different scales, and that's the one often referred to as polycentrism. The idea that you have governing structures at different scales and that nest within each other, and that there's this norm that each decision should be made as low down the hierarchy as possible so that it's made in as diverse a way as possible. However, I think that there's a natural dynamic that the upper nodes of the governing structure keep trying to suck power up to the larger scale. And what I think we're seeing with blockchain, and what we're seeing by analogy with something I saw in doing business in large corporations, I'll come back to that, is where the circles don't nest, they cross-cut. That the lower circles, in order to resist getting sucked up into the larger circles, are circles that cross-cut between different larger circles. So this is what in the crypto world we refer to as jurisdictional arbitrage. No one larger circle can quash Bitcoin because Bitcoin cross-cuts through all the jurisdictions. In large corporations, you have this internal problem, which is we know that long-term promises and contracts is an important way to coordinate. But internal to a corporation, you cannot make a binding contract to yourself. What I've seen happen pretty much knowledgeably and on purpose, although nobody was explicit about it, is people in companies purposely making collaborative arrangements through other companies, much of the motivation of which is to commit now to the stability of that activity against the possible changing the mind of any one of the involved corporations. And that works.
The Commons. The Commons works.
Yes. This is Eleanor Ostrom's work.
Yes, the Commons works.
The polycentrism.
Yes.
And that different kinds of coordination should happen at different scales.
Exactly.
Supply chain management would be an example of
yes, yes.
Exactly.
Supply chain management across companies.
Yes. Also civil society, which has lots of overlapping circles.
Yeah, so I have to acknowledge that one I really honestly did intend to turn it into a question.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
So first, more people in the crypto world should read Eleanor Ostrom.
Yes.
It's like the applied management of a commons. And second, everybody should read Mark's The Agora Papers, which was smart contracts in 1988. You should read them. If you happen to have too short an attention span to read them, then follow me on Twitter at Patrissimo, because I've been preparing a tweet summary of highlights from the Agora
Papers. Love me some Eleanor Ostrom, but I must take issue with her use of the word commons. I think, in fact, she's talking about club goods, and I think that's unfortunate. It's led to a lot of misunderstanding. But her work is excellent, well worth reading. She deserves the Nobel Prize.
And on that note, thank you everyone for and now, so those who paid for the after party drinks, definitely stay and enjoy these drinks. The other ones, the drinks are there. There's a jar you can put in a small tip or whatever you feel like you're getting for these drinks. Talk to this guy. He's gonna swim from Alcatraz to San Francisco in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, with Charlie Dice too, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, real quick. Yeah. So basically, what I mean, as a way to, counter the tragedy of the commons that is so apparent in the degenerative world that we live in, I'm going to swim to regenerate. If you can't join in the swim from Alcatraz to shore, I ask you to just take a cold shower or a cold bath that day so that we can shed our degenerative skin and wake up anew in 2019 and restore ecosystems and restore the earth the way is our birthright here on this planet. Swim to regenerate, January 1st, 2019. Thank you.
Yeah.
My URL is daviddfriedman.com. Among other things, if you want to learn economics, my price theory textbook is web, and lots of other things.
Really good. Thank you.